I think everything is working, so let's make sure. Do. Okay, so I'm going to move myself to here for the intro here because as you can see on this debate stage, there are 3 candidates. This was a very interesting election. So allow this to be my welcome. We're going to go over the 1992 presidential election night coverage on this wonderful Sunday morning. It's still morning where I am, so 1992 was a very interesting year. Republicans had held the White House for 12 years up to this point, and George H.W. Bush, the 41st president of the United States, was running for re-election. And to give some background about this particular election, it's very interesting how Bill Clinton became the Democratic nominee for this election year. And then we had a third-party candidate named Ross Perot, who people argue to this day whether Perot took more votes from Bush or whether he took more votes from Clinton or whether he helped swing the election for Clinton by him running. There's a lot of people who believe that. I kind of think, and most people agree, he took more votes away from Bush than Clinton, but there are a lot of people who are at this point kind of dissatisfied with both parties, and that's been a running theme of American politics for God knows, how long, between both the Democrats and the Republicans. And he provided kind of a bit of a third way, which Bill Clinton would adopt in his presidency, by the way, spoilers. But to give some background, and I want to just focus on George H.W. Bush and his presidency and how Bill Clinton came into the fold here, or rather, he rose to prominence and became the Democratic nominee in 1992. 1992 is a very unusual election year in this sense. A lot of people going in were thinking it was going to be a repeat of 1968, where you had Nixon, Humphrey, and then a third-party candidate, George Wallace, actually win enough states to get electoral votes. And Perot had enough broad support that he might have picked off a few states and made the race kind of interesting between Bush and Clinton. And he did, not because he won any states, but because he siphoned votes away from both candidates to varying degrees. It kind of threw the electoral map for a little bit of a loop, although when we go over it later in this stream, you'll note that some trends start to appear that should be familiar to most of you today who have been following elections and whose idea of red states and blue states began in 2000, and you're not knowledgeable about anything as far as presidential election politics go before 2000, or even before 2008, or even before 2016. But if you've been watching my election night streams, you should be a little bit more knowledgeable now. So enough of that. George Bush was a very popular president for most of the term that he served throughout 1989, 1990, and really into 1991. The economy was doing pretty decent. And in 1991, you had the Gulf War, which was the first Gulf War, where Iraq had invaded Kuwait, and George Bush led a coalition to include the United States and a whole bunch of allies to repel Iraq and Saddam Hussein's army out of Kuwait, and they liberated Kuwait, and he became extremely popular in the foreign policy realm as a result back in 1991. And 1991, usually the year before the election, is when opposing candidates of the other party for an incumbent president start declaring their candidacies and start raising money to win. George Bush had like a 90% approval rating in 1991. He was probably on his way, or at least a lot of Democrats thought in 1991 that he was on his way to winning a landslide very similar to what Ronald Reagan won in 1984, like, 48, 49, maybe all 50 states. He was just that popular. And so a lot of the big name Democrats that year who were either governors or senators, because that's usually the stepping stone to the presidency. You have to be a governor of a state or a senator or even a vice president. A lot of the big name Democrats, like your John Kerry, Joe Biden, Chris Dodd, a few others that would recurringly run whenever there was an open race among the Democrats, decided not to throw their hat in the ring for 1992 because they didn't want to lose so badly. So kind of a second-run candidate by the name of Bill Clinton, who was governor of Arkansas, was in the running as a result, because nobody else who everybody thought was going to run on the Democratic side ran. I think the only other prominent candidate who ran on the Democratic side in 1992 was Jerry Brown, who at that time was the former governor of California. And Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown had gotten into a few spats among their debates back in 1992. And Jerry Brown was accusing Bill Clinton of a lot of the things that, by the way, Republicans in Congress would accuse Bill Clinton of once he became president. His ethics violations, his impropriety, and a whole bunch of other stuff in his character. Bill Clinton, just to give a background on him, he's very much and this is the reason a lot of people liked him in the 1990s, and even to this day, a lot of people like him, is he's very much the true American dream, rags to riches story. He grew up poor and was born into a poor family in Hope, Arkansas, which, if you've ever driven along I-30 and wanted to stop in Hope and look at the Bill Clinton Presidential Library, which I haven't, but I kind of want to one of these days, Hope's not a very... Hope doesn't have a lot of hope. Let's just say that. It's... I'll just leave it at that. But he grew up really poor, but he was smart. He is probably one of our smartest presidents as far as, like, brain power, IQ goes. He... I want to say, did he go to Yale? I'm almost sure he went to Yale for law school. And then he also studied, he was a Rhodes Scholar, I think, too. So he studied at either Oxford or Cambridge, I forget which one it is, in the UK. And so he was very smart. He got into Ivy League schools, and then he got into politics. I think he was a U.S. congressman for a little bit. Then he became governor of Arkansas for a term back in the 70s. Then he lost re-election. And then the way he earned the moniker, or the nickname, the Comeback Kid, was that he was governor of Arkansas in his 30s, and he won a second non-consecutive term, I think, as governor of Arkansas back in the 80s, back when Reagan was just really popular, and so that's how he earned his moniker. So I don't remember if he was governor of Arkansas at the time that he ran, but while he was president, Mike Huckabee was actually governor of Arkansas. Arkansas started flipping to the Republicans at the state level, not just in U.S. presidential election cycles in the 1990s. So Bill Clinton was kind of a very unique enigma. He was very popular among working class Americans and even a lot of Southerners as a result, who were not necessarily the church-going type and not very... They were conservative in the small c sense, but not moralists, so to speak. They loved Bill Clinton. A lot of suburbanites loved Bill Clinton as well. Bill Clinton had very broad appeal across the political spectrum. Maybe not to the same level as Reagan, but he was kind of like oozing with charisma. Maybe a second coming of John F. Kennedy almost. So, but there were also a lot of people who did not like Bill Clinton. The Republicans who hated Bill Clinton the most tended to be Republicans who are very, very big to this day about being, how should we say, ethical and moral and a good person. A lot of the Republicans who will vote down ticket and support the party but hate Trump are pretty much the same mold of Republicans who hated Bill Clinton the most. And what's funny is if you kind of flip that around, a lot of the people who are Trump's most ardent supporters, who are former Democrats especially, were people who voted for Bill Clinton both times and loved Bill Clinton. If you actually compare Trump and Clinton, and I'm not trying to get too much into politics about whether I like one party or the other, or one candidate or the other, Bill Clinton is kind of very much a Democratic version of Trump, and Trump is very much like a Republican version of Clinton as far as like their personalities go and the way they conduct their policies and the way they kind of like make people move on the political chessboard before they do. Trump likes to use a lot of what I call trial balloons, which Bill Clinton like absolutely abused. What he would do is he would get somebody in his administration or somebody in the press to leak something or leak like a potential policy that might go into place just to see what the public's and other politicians' reaction was to it. And he would either go through with it or he would actually pull it back depending on what the public sentiment was on that, whether it was from politicians or from the general public, the voting public, or both. And so Trump has kind of taken that playbook from Clinton, which isn't really a Clinton playbook. Reagan did that a little bit to some extent, but you can more easily do it now because like media coverage is 24/7. Now we have social media and all that, but the modern kind of political way of campaigning kind of started nascently in the 1990s, and you'll kind of see that in this election and the way the election coverage goes. So what happened was George Bush, going back, pivoting gears from like Clinton to Bush. Bush was very popular in 1991. Well, the economy started kind of sputtering and stumbling in 1992. And it wasn't that great going in. And Bill Clinton would campaign on the theme in the general election of "It's the economy, stupid," where people were, he painted George Bush as kind of like an out-of-touch elitist who would rather, you know, go start wars in another country and all that, but doesn't care about like the common man, the common person or whatever, who is struggling to put food on the table. And that kind of works anytime there's like a economic recession. And that's part of what dug into like George Bush's support, especially in the, especially among the working classes and especially among the Midwest and the South. And so you'll kind of see that play out a little bit as we go forward in election night here. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and try to, let's see. Let's turn the volume down on this a little bit. We're going to watch NBC's coverage of the 1992 presidential election, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this like I did my previous election nights, where I'm going to skip past a lot of what I would call the filler. But you will see some like Senate races and governor races. And this is the election in 1996 as well, where you'll start to see some familiar names that, that are still in American politics to this day. A lot of the people who are in the most senior positions of the United States Senate and the federal government got their start in the federal government and Congress back in the 1990s, and you'll see their names on this election and the next election. And so I think that's something that's kind of one of those Easter eggs anytime we watch one of these. But like I said, we're going to watch NBC's coverage. I may tune in a little bit to CBS and ABC's coverage as well as I might tune in a little bit to CNN's coverage, because they've kind of become a dominant force in news media since in the 1980s and the 1990s is when CNN really got their start. And CNN surged in popularity in the 90s because of their coverage of the Gulf War. And so 1992 was the first election cycle where at least maybe 10, 20% of American households were tuning into them instead of the three major networks. And so let's go ahead and begin. Let me know if I need to adjust the audio.
The White House, for the past 12 years, home to Republicans. Will that be changing?
The Capitol, for more than a generation, a power base for Democrats. In a year of voter anger, we'll see how it will be changing.
The White House, the Congress, the prospect of change. Our focus tonight, Election Night 92.
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night. From election headquarters in New York, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
Good evening. This should be a historic passage tonight. We have a political child of John F. Kennedy, who protested against the Vietnam War, running against a World War II hero whose patron saint in American politics was Ronald Reagan. One generation against another, and then a third-party candidate, an eccentric billionaire with a keen sense of the new technology and the possibilities of that in the American electoral system. I'm Tom Brokaw here with Bryant Gumbel, who's going to be keeping track of a lot of the change tonight as well. Bryant.
Well, Tom, clearly Clinton's road to Election Day has been like no other we've seen in some time, and the same could be said of the 103rd Congress that is being decided tonight. As we've noted, retirements, defections, some defeats in the primary have already guaranteed us turnover of considerable note. 91 new members at a minimum, a third of the Senate to be decided tonight. We've got some projections to get to. We'll get to them shortly.
And you and your partner working both ends of the clock, Katie Couric, keeping track of the trends and the analysis tonight.
That's right, Tom. Thanks to our NBC National Exit Poll. By the time this night is over, we will have talked to 50,000 people all across the country as they leave their polling places, asking them, in the words of Admiral Stockdale, who are they and why are they here? The answer should.
And so with what she's mentioning about Admiral Stockdale, I think his name was John Stockdale. He was the vice presidential running mate for Ross Perot, who was the third-party candidate. And so I'll use this bit to interrupt just a little bit and go into a bit about Perot. Perot was a billionaire in Texas. He died a few years ago, but he ran third party as an independent. And I think his party was called the Reform Party. And the Reform Party later on in the 90s was the party that Trump started to dab a little bit into as far as like presidential politics go. But to get back to Perot kind of tapped into some dissatisfaction with people on both sides of the aisle, but more so, I would say, on the right than on the left as far as government spending and government becoming out of touch. And he used a term called that giant sucking sound, which was deficits increasing. And he would talk about the national debt all the time, because what happened in the 80s was Ronald Reagan got his tax cuts, but deficit spending started surging because the federal government didn't really reduce spending all that much from the 80s. The tax cuts did actually generate more and more revenue as the 80s went by, but with revenue going up like on one kind of logarithmic or exponential path, government spending kind of went even more. The path was even steeper, and so deficits were kind of, a lot of people and a lot of pundits were talking about how deficits and the national debt were getting out of control, which is kind of the case today among some circles, but it seems like fewer people care now, even though the problem right now compared to what it was in the 1990s is probably 5 to 10 times worse. And so Perot kind of tapped into that a little bit. What's interesting, if you want to know a little bit of a personal history, is that I was alive during this election, but my parents both voted in this election. And Mama Cat voted for Perot, actually, and but Daddy Cat he voted for Bill Clinton in 1992, and he was the last Democrat that my dad voted for in a presidential election, was Bill Clinton. He kind of liked Bill Clinton for the same reasons I was kind of mentioning. He thought George Bush was out of touch, even though he had voted for Bush, I think, in 1988, simply because, you know, Bush ran as a third term of Reagan. But I think that's also part of what Bush's stumbling block was, is that Reagan was kind of out of the picture now, and he had to run as a second term of George Bush. And had the economy been strong, I think he would have been reelected. Perot wouldn't have gotten anywhere, but things can kind of change. In 1991, people were sure that he was going to get reelected, and then in 1992, well, look what happened, and we're gonna watch that play out tonight.
Would be very enlightening.
And John Chancellor, you're going to be keeping track of all that from your corner, the Sage corner over there, telling us what it means and what it's likely to mean for the future.
Tom, I'm wondering if another 16-year cycle is going. We elected John F. Kennedy, the Democrats did, in 1960. 16 years later, Jimmy Carter was elected in 1976, and now it's 16 years later again, and we don't know how this is going to come out, but if Clinton wins tonight, people will be talking about that 16-year cycle.
And so I just want to point out one thing that is true about the 16-year cycle. Until recently, well, 2024 was when it was broken. 16 years after 1992, Obama got elected in 08. The 16-year cycle continues. Like, if you go back before 1960 and 1944, FDR ran and won for his fourth term. So it had been going on before and after for a while. So another note I want to make, if you've been watching all of my streams regarding like past presidential elections and election nights all this time, in 1960, when we were looking at NBC's coverage, John Chancellor was one of the commentators back then. And in 1960, I think he was in his 30s. He's getting up there in years now, as you can see. And I just wanted to point out this 1992 is the last election cycle. You will see John Chancellor working for NBC News and at the news desk. He passed away a few years later, I think in 1996. So he was kind of semi-retired at this point. But yeah, this is the last election. You'll have to say goodbye to John Chancellor after tonight.
All right, John, we've had polls have closed now in 2 states, in Indiana and Kentucky. And at 7 o'clock at this hour, we've got a rush of votes closing in some important states. There they are all together. We've got 66 electoral votes. We're looking for a total of 270 for a win tonight. Florida, Georgia, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. So that's what's closing at this time. We want to show you the national map now so that we can show you what's going on. We'll be coloring tonight the states that Bush wins in blue. Clinton will be in red, and Ross Perot will have that kind of neutral color for you. We do have some projections that we can call at this hour. Let's begin, and it's good news now for Bill Clinton. He is the projected winner in the state of Georgia with 13 electoral votes. It last went for a Democrat in 1980. Favorite son, Jimmy Carter, of course. That's a very big win for Bill Clinton in the state of Georgia, 13 electoral votes. In New Hampshire, he said, if you give me a chance in this election, I'll be with you till the last dog dies. The dog has not yet died, and neither has Bill Clinton. He wins tonight in New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes. An important win in New England. That's a staunch Republican part of the country. Vermont, same thing, right next door in New England. A very good sign for Bill Clinton. So on our map now, we'll begin to color in the maps, the states that Bill Clinton has won. Red in Georgia, also up there, the tiny states, but important to him, of New Hampshire first, and then Vermont. It was in New Hampshire that he survived. Now, how does that translate into electoral votes? 270 required. Bill Clinton has got 20 so far. No states have shown up yet for George Bush or for Ross Perot. We'll also want to remind you, this is the national vote as we have it. 2% counted so far. Bush with a small lead at this time. That is inconsequential. So, John Chancellor, as we look at the first returns that we're getting, that's very heartening news for Bill Clinton.
I think it's very important. Georgia has gone Democratic in the last 28 years, only the 2 times that Jimmy Carter was on the ticket. Been Republican. The Republicans got that lock on it back in 1968. And Vermont and New Hampshire have only gone Democratic in the great Johnson landslide of 1964. So these are really, they may be small states, but it really is interesting to see the historical turn here. If this carries throughout the country, it looks good, as you say.
And John Chancellor, being the sage he is, he's on to something here. 1992 is that first year, and it doesn't happen to both parties. Sometimes it happens to only one party, but 1992 was the year that a lot of states started voting Democrat because of Bill Clinton's third way. You can do a little bit more research on that, but a lot of states started voting Democrat then. There are very liberal states that have been voting Democrat ever since 1992, and this is kind of the election where it started. There were a lot of states that are now red states that were still kind of swing states back then, but 1992 is the first election where you're going to see a lot of today's solid blue states start to develop, Vermont being one of them. But there are much bigger states than that have remained in the Democratic column ever since.
We want to remind people about the projection policy that we have as well, because we do know that it can be controversial. We do not project a state until all or most of the polls in that state have closed. And then because you elect a president in this country state by state in the Electoral College, we'll compile those votes state by state. And it is possible for a candidate to win the presidency before we count the votes, say, west of the Mississippi, just as an example. So we'll be talking about that throughout the evening. We do remind you, wherever you live in this country, if the polls still are open, it's important for you to go to the voting place and exercise your most fundamental right of democracy. Brian Gumbel.
Tom, we're going to be talking in greater detail as the night goes on about the makeup of the House. As everyone knows, all 435 seats are up for grabs on this evening. We'll talk about that a little later, but first we want to talk about the Senate and take a look at its present makeup. Right now, the Democrats enjoy an advantage of 57 to 43. Tonight, there are 34 seats at issue, 20 of them Democrats. There was a time when the Republicans had high hopes of making inroads into the Democratic majority, but those hopes have been moderated somewhat. And so we can give you some projections at this hour, starting in Florida, where Bob Graham has been returned to Washington for a second term. One of the freshman class of '86 turned back the challenge of Congressman Bill Grant. And Tom noted that Clinton had carried Vermont. Patrick Leahy up there has won a fourth term, turning back Vermont Secretary of State James Douglas. Some projections from earlier out of Kentucky. Wendell Ford is going back for a fourth term after beating David Williams, an attractive candidate who we will be hearing from further down the road, but tonight was not his night. And in Indiana, the man who took over Dan Quayle's seat after Quayle was appointed or won election to vice president, Dan Coates has won re-election to his first full term. He beat Joe Hogsett. Interestingly enough, Tom, both Ford and Patrick Leahy had voted against the Gulf War. It was one of those factors that Republicans had been counting on to turn things their way once November came, and it just didn't work out that way. There are a couple of other Senate races we want to bring you up to date on that we are going to be watching closely, a couple of face-offs that we'll be following very closely as the night goes on. In one of the nastier races in the nation, Al D'Amato is trying to turn back the challenge of New York's Attorney General Robert Abrams. That one's still too close to call. Arlen Specter going against Lynn Yackel. This one attracting an awful lot of national attention after Yackel took on Specter for his treatment of Anita Hill during the Clarence Thomas hearings. In Illinois, Carol Mosley Braun, the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, trying to become the first black Democrat and the first African-American woman to be elected to the Senate. After defeating Alan Dixon in the primary, she's going against Rich Williamson. In Ohio, John Glenn, once considered the Democrats' most vulnerable incumbent this November, is in a tough race against Michael DeWine. And in California, one of two Senate seats at issue on the
Remember when I was talking about familiar faces? Well, Mike DeWine, I think, is the current governor of Ohio.
Barbara Boxer going for Alan Cranston's vacated seat, being opposed there by TV commentator Bruce Hershenson in a matchup of the extreme liberal and conservative philosophers. Tom?
Dan Quayle is breathing a lot easier at this hour. We're now able to project that the state of Indiana, which is Dan Quayle's home state, of course, won by President Bush tonight 12 electoral votes. That is rock rib Republican territory out there. Last voted in 1964, and it was a long time before that they voted Republican. It was in 1964 for Lyndon Johnson. So the state of Indiana now goes blue for President Bush. As you can see, Georgia, Vermont, and New Hampshire are already colored in for Bill Clinton. What does that mean in terms of electoral votes? 20 to 12 at this hour. There is the possibility that Ross Perot could win an electoral vote without winning a state, by the way, because in Maine and in Nebraska, they award electoral votes by congressional districts. And there's a possibility in both of those independent-minded places that Ross Perot may, in fact, pick up one of those congressional districts.
I want to say, I'd have to look it up, but I want to say Perot one of Perot's best states was Maine, and I think he almost won Maine's 2nd congressional district, but I'll have to look that one up.
We'll be back with more on Decision 92 right after this.
Decision 92 Election Night is being sponsored in part by Aetna, a policy to do more. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? It's more than a question. It's an answer.
Ask anyone who's driven a Ford lately. They're the best ones to explain how satisfied customers become repeat customers. Because they've given Ford more repeat buyers than any other car and truck division in America. Simply put, when you build quality products, your customers come back for more. Have you driven a Ford lately? It's more than just a question. It's an answer.
I know some of you like watching the old commercials, so I'm not going to fast forward past some of them.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you.
No one has to tell you that doing business today is more challenging than ever. But all over the world, one company is helping you meet those challenges head on, no matter what it takes. New challenges, new thinking.
What could be a better time of year to reflect on the importance and benefits we all get from having a two-party system? For the hundreds of thousands of businesses in America who use 800 service, that freedom of choice means, finally, the chance to get competitive service, better prices, and often unique and better ways to do things.
We're back now with Decision 92, and it's already been an exceptional year in American presidential politics. A three-man race, one generation against another. We're able to make a call now in the governor's race in the state of Vermont, a state that we awarded already to Bill Clinton in the presidential contest, and Howard Dean, who is running for a full term after the death of the late Richard Snell.
That's a name you'll see in future streams of election night coverage because he gained a prominence when he ran in 2004 in the Democratic primary against John Kerry, John Edwards, and some of the others. So,
Howard Dean has been elected to a full term, according to our projection. It appears tonight that we will have a record turnout of voters across the country. A lot of interest generated by these three presidential candidates, and then the exceptional array of information and media outlets that were available to the candidates and to the voters this year. We want to show you some of the polling that is going on around the country, if we can right now. These are we're going to go live to Boston, that's right, City Hall Plaza. 2,500 registered voters expected to cast ballots. 600 had voted by noon, despite very bad weather in that place. Some waited 2 hours in line. It may stay open after 8 o'clock tonight to handle the latecomers. Voters are a mix, some from the Beacon Hill area, others from downtown and the waterfront area. Massachusetts, of course, has been solidly in the Democratic camp for some time now. This is in Seattle, one of 600 voting places in King County. This is the John Jay Elementary School in Seattle, grades kindergarten through 5th. Voting place for 6 precincts. We want to remind especially those of you in the Mountain Time Zone, those kids don't look quite old enough to vote. Old enough to ride a bicycle, but maybe not quite old enough to vote out there in King County with their bicycle.
I want to say Washington State's one of those states where it's all mail-in voting now. So remember, this was still the era where people all 50 states, it was pretty much in-person voting. I think it was Oregon that started the whole trend of mail a ballot to everybody in your state.
Almost time. We do want to remind all of you, especially in the Central, Mountain, and the Western time zones, that it's important to go to the polling places. However, this presidential race begins to stack up here this evening, because your votes do count for a wide variety of local issues and, of course, for those important congressional races as well. Let's go now to Little Rock, Arkansas, to one of the boy wonders of the Clinton campaign, George Stephanopoulos, who has been the communications director and a senior advisor from the beginning of that, a former Rhodes Scholar himself,
Got a
former
little
aide to Richard
less gray
Gephardt.
hair.
He's looking pretty happy tonight because, based on what they're hearing from around the country, it does look rather optimistic at this hour for Bill Clinton. Is it fair to say that you are heartened, Mr. Stephanopoulos?
Well, we feel real good right now, Tom, but as you said just a minute ago, it's very important for everybody to get out and vote. Polls are still open across the country. We need every vote. We need every vote for change we can get tonight, and we hope everybody gets to the polls before they close.
Stephanopoulos, if it does go the way that you want it to tonight, will you begin the transition to a new government by sending signals immediately, not only in this country but around the world? And what may those signals be?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to say anything. The president-elect, if Governor Clinton wins, can speak for himself, but obviously he would want to reassure the financial markets and reassure foreign governments about our continuity in foreign policy, but there'll be plenty of time for that tomorrow. The polls are still open, and we hope that everybody continues to get out there and vote, and we'll deal with everything else later.
I think that we both have underscored the importance of voting by now. Let's just talk theoretically then. If Bill Clinton is the winner tonight, will you draw a new government from beyond the Democratic Party?
Governor Clinton has said throughout this campaign that he wants to reach out to all Americans, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. And he said consistently throughout this campaign that he would reach for the best people of real excellence, as he did with Senator Gore when he chose him for vice president. So I feel quite confident that it wouldn't necessarily be exclusive to the Democratic Party.
Finally, Mr. Stephanopoulos, Ross Perot says that he demonstrated that the American people are willing to go through some pain to correct their problems. Do you share that assessment?
Well, as Governor Clinton said many times in this campaign, the middle class in this country have suffered quite enough pain. Of course, everybody in this country has to assume more responsibility, has to shoulder their common load. Solving our problems isn't going to be real easy, but if we all pull together, and as we see tonight through record turnout and record youth turnout, people are ready to do this, people are ready to vote for change, and I think people are ready to accept that kind of responsibility, and that makes us just as hard.
And you see some common themes going back to Jimmy Carter a little bit, but those are kind of words that got him in trouble. But Clinton kind of phrased them a little bit differently. And then, you know, George Stephanopoulos is kind of repeating the hope and change. And Obama would kind of adopt that in 08. So there's a lot of things in politics, whether you're Democrat or Republican, no matter what the candidate does. They just rebrand the same slogans and the same stuff every few election cycles. So it's nothing new.
As the early numbers coming in tonight.
Thank you very much, George Stephanopoulos. Now let's go to the other side, to the George Bush campaign. Fred Malek, who is in Houston tonight with the president. Mr. Malek, you and I have known each other a long time, and I know you're a very pragmatic man. As you look at that map showing that Vermont, New Hampshire, and Georgia have gone for Bill Clinton, where are you building your fire breaks at this hour?
Well, Tom, I would caution you not to put a whole lot of credence in exit polls. You might remember the last time we ran in New Hampshire last February, the exit polls showed us at 1 point dead even with Buchanan. They ended up having us 6 points ahead, and we ended up winning by about 18. So I don't think the exit polls tell the whole story. I think people are going to vote their conscience tonight, and it's a large turnout. I think that's good for us, and we are still hopeful that we can pull this out.
Well, that's a fair caution, Mr. Malek, but then let me ask you the question, where are your best hopes tonight?
Well, I think our best hopes are to have a very strong showing in the South and in the Rocky Mountain states, and to win some of the big Midwestern states such as Ohio, Michigan, New Jersey in the East, Connecticut. I think that all these are within our reach, and we can see putting these together into an electoral majority.
Earlier, John Cochran said that there was no one in the Bush campaign who believed that if they went on longer, it would really change the outcome. Is that your belief as well, that we ran this campaign as long as we needed to?
I'm not so sure about that. It seems like it's been a very long campaign. We were coming together very, very close in the polls as of last Friday. I don't know how accurate the polls have been, but on Friday we were very close, and then we had this very, very unfortunate news with the Walsh indictment of Camp Weinberger, and the polls started to diverge again. I think if we had a little more time, people would get to hear more about President Bush's message and realize that what this economy needs to get it moving is a tax reduction that President Bush is offering, and not the tax increase that Bill Clinton's calling about. So yes, I think a little more time would be useful.
Mr. Malek, do you think that the president hurt himself when he was trying to appear presidential and then called his opponents bozos and crazy?
Oh, I don't think so. I think that he was doing that in good humor, and I think most people understood that. I think the key thing here is that he's got a program to fix the economic woes of this country and to grow this economy over the next 4 years, to get spending under control and balance the budget. And I think the American people, when they get into that voting booth, are going to identify with that and not with the tax increases and the bigger government, bigger bureaucracy that Bill Clinton is for. So I'm still hopeful we're going to pull this out, Tom.
Thank you very much, Fred Malek, tonight. Brian Gumbel.
Tom, thanks very much. Whatever your feelings about Bill Clinton, one has to give him high marks for staying with his message. As we've oft said, the sign at Clinton headquarters said the answer is the economy, stupid. It proved to be that tonight. Katie Kurtz got more in the polling on that.
Right. Brian, by far, the economy was the most important issue for voters today. In our national poll, we surveyed more than 10,000 people as they left their polling places. We asked them what one or two issues mattered the most to them when selecting a president. And the top three choices all involve the economy, an issue that Bill Clinton embraced. More than 4 in 10 people told us the economy and jobs were most important. The federal budget deficit was cited by 23% and health care by 21%. Now, issues pushed by the Republicans did not go over nearly as well with voters. Only 14% cited family values as important, and taxes were mentioned by only 13% of the people we asked. And when we asked voters more specifically about the condition of the economy, this is what they had to say. Only 1 in 5, or 20%, said it was good. 4 out of 5 people said it was not so good or poor. And among those who said it was poor, Bill Clinton leads by a margin of about 7-1. So the bottom line is, not only do people care about the economy, but most people do not think it's in very good shape. So indeed, that sign that's hanging up in the Clinton headquarters, "It's the economy, stupid," may turn out to be a very intelligent slogan, Brian.
Katie, the central themes were change versus trust. You told us about change / the economy. What about trust? What's the early polling showing on that?
Well, it turns out that did not have a lot of impact with the people we spoke to as they left the polls, and we're going to have some numbers for you on that a little bit later.
Okay, and whatever impact it did have had to be modified somewhat by the revelations of Friday that you noted a little bit earlier with Mr. Malek.
And James Carville, who in whose office that sign was hanging at the Clinton headquarters, often called the Raging Cajun, the Louisiana strategist. Unusual situation. He has a romance with Mary Matlin, who is the political director for George Bush. However this all turns out, we have been told by a very reliable source that Thursday of this week, they lift off together for Venice. James Carville has said he's not interested in going into Washington. He said, the only thing I'm going to run from now on is my mouth, and I'm going to do that for a fee. He was breaking out a bottle of 1964 scotch, I think.
I didn't know we had the social register going tonight, too.
Right, we're doing
Thanks
what
for
we can.
filling us in on the really
We'll have a complete
important
analysis of that later on.
James Carville always has his priorities
I want to remind
straight.
you that at this hour, Bill Clinton has won New Hampshire, Vermont, and Georgia. We project that George Bush is the winner in Indiana. We want to tell you that Florida has, the polls have closed, also South Carolina, also the state of Virginia. We've not been able to make a call yet in the state of Kentucky. Bill Clinton in the last hour was out and exercising his right to exercise. He's had the Battle of the Waistline. That's his daughter Chelsea, named for the song Chelsea Morning. Shortly before she was born, Hillary and Bill Clinton were in London on a fine morning, and Bill Clinton began to sing the song, so they named his 13-year-old daughter now Chelsea. John, Chancellor is with us now. If Bill Clinton, in fact, does win, Chelsea would be the first time that we've had a single child in the White House, an only child, the first teenager. A lot of pressure.
Amy Carter?
Well, but she had siblings. They came and went. Remember, brothers and sisters. She was there as a teenager,
right.
but the only child.
She just seemed to be the only child. I mean, her father used to have these wonderful talks about what a nuclear policy with Amy Carter. I think you have to feel sorry for these kids, though, when they go into that fishbowl. Chelsea's going to have a lot of backbone.
But you've got to give them high marks. They did a very good job of keeping her out of the limelight throughout these past 8 or 9 months.
Amy Carter?
No, Chelsea Clinton.
Well, I think they have, and I think they're going to have much tougher when you're in Washington.
Sure.
We haven't gotten them there yet, folks. There's a lot more ahead of us tonight. We'll be back with more on Decision 92 after this.
Here from Washington is Bob Kerr.
Good evening. It is still early this election night, but already.
Okay, so I think these are some of the local races. We're going to skip past those, though, for the most part.
Several important states to both Clinton and Bush have closed their polls. New Hampshire and
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
Good evening once again. It is now 7:30 in the East, and we've had polls close in states that represent 126 electoral votes. A reminder that 270 are required. Polls now closing in North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. Those top two states especially pivotal in this election. We'll be watching them carefully. We are still not able to make a call in the state of Florida, for example. President Bush is counting on that heavily. The state of Kentucky, which will be hotly contested during the course of this race. We want to show you what we have at this hour, however, because we have been able to make some calls around the country. We color the states in red for Bill Clinton and blue for George Bush, and up there in the corner, those should be red.
By the way, I wanted to point out this is also the last year that NBC will do the colors reversed, where Republican is blue but Democrat is red. I think all the other networks had switched to the current red state, blue state paradigm that everybody knows now.
Red, Vermont, and New Hampshire. We had called them earlier. There's the paintbrush. It finally came through. We got the little person in the back, and they're doing the best that they can. They don't always get to color them as quickly as we'd like them to from time to time. What does that mean in terms of the electoral? Well, we can now project another state for Bill Clinton, West Virginia. This is solid Democratic territory. Bill Clinton would have been expected to win West Virginia. In 2 out of the 3 last elections, it has gone Democratic. Bill Clinton gets the 5 electoral votes in West Virginia. Back to the map again. There they are. Everything now in the appropriate colors. Red for Clinton. Blue, that's Indiana for George Bush, Dan Quayle's home state. What does that mean in terms of the electoral vote? Well, let us show you, because that's the number that we'll want to watch very carefully all evening long here. 270 required. Bill Clinton now with 25. George Bush with 12. There are some big states still out there, of course, that have just closed. The national vote, that is the popular vote, as it's being counted slowly. 2% of it is in so far. And George Bush holds a 4-point lead. And it'll be interesting to see if Ross Perot can stay at that 16-point mark, because if he can, then he becomes a historic figure, close to Teddy Roosevelt in terms of how well he's been doing. A couple of governors now we can project winners. In the state of North Carolina, Jim Hunt retains that seat. North Carolina, Democrats gain the seat in North Carolina. And in the state of West Virginia, Gaston Caperton, Democrat, and he holds a seat in the state of West Virginia. NBC's Tim Russert, who is our moderator of Meet the Press and Washington bureau chief and political analyst and all-around political gadfly, has been working the telephones for most of this day. Tim, what are the signs that we're seeing that are good for Clinton or bad for Clinton, good for Bush or bad for Bush?
Tom, the thing that our people on the phone here are pointing out, conversations in Ohio, Michigan, California, one is turnout. Cook County now estimates in Chicago their turnout is going to be 79%. In Michigan, they have gone to court to keep the polls open. The lines are so long. And 2 key groups, Tom. A Democrat has not carried the white vote since 1964. Catholic ethnic groups and independents who live in the suburbs. The states that Governor Clinton has won so far, he has carried both those groups. If that trend continues through the Midwest and South and Western states, it could be a very good night indeed for Bill Clinton.
All right, thank you very much, Tim Russert. Bryant Gumbel, you've been keeping track.
It's interesting to note about that. He is, and that would remain the case. But I think in 1992, that was the closest. Bill Clinton did almost win the white vote. I think he only lost it by a couple of points.
Back of the congressional races and other national.
Yeah, Tom, you noted a couple of moments ago that North Carolina, Ohio, the polls have closed right now, but you can't project either state. We also can't project a couple of Senate races there that we are watching very carefully because a couple of incumbents are in danger. In North Carolina, Terry Sanford being opposed by Locke Faircloth. That race is a very tight one. And as we noted a little bit earlier, in Ohio, John Glenn being challenged by Michael DeWine. We're keeping an eye on that one, too. But moving on to the House, we said we'd talk about it a little later. Here's an opportunity to. As I think you know right now, the present House allows the Democrats to enjoy a 100-plus advantage. And with all seats up, the Republicans had hoped to make some serious inroads. For a time, they had talked of a swing of 35 to 40 seats, but now realistically, they are looking at perhaps only half that many. Odetta Rogers is standing by on Capitol Hill this morning. And Odetta, we're talking about a minimum of 91 new members for the 103rd Congress. Are we yet in any position to tell what that new Congress may look like?
It will definitely look like, Bryant, there will be more women and more minorities. In fact, there are 108 women running, including incumbents, and there are women running for the Senate also. It's definitely expected that there will be more representation. And as one person put it today that I talked with earlier, it's said that it would look more like the country in terms of having more women and minorities included. Remember also that many of the people who will be coming to Washington will be coming in on an anti-incumbent campaign, and they'll want change when they get here. And of course, that's something leaders here are looking at, and they're hoping, at least the Democratic Party has mentioned, where they'll have the majority in the House, that they can make the Democratic Party very cohesive. They don't want a lot of people coming in, newcomers, saying that they want change, they want reform, which is what we saw back in 1974 after Watergate, and you had 90-plus new members coming in. So there's an effort on the part of Democratic leadership to make sure that they branch out to all these newcomers. And in fact, this upcoming Sunday, they'll be starting what they call seminars, where they'll be meeting with the newcomers. They'll be doing that in Los Angeles, in Atlanta, and in Chicago. This is a year that the Republicans had hoped they would have a lot more members coming in, as you mentioned, but it's looking like they won't. And as a result, I'm told that Republicans will be looking to the conservative Democrats in the House, hoping that they can form some kind of coalition with them.
Okay, Odetta Rogers, thank you. We'll talk a little bit later this evening. We noted some of the voluntary defections from Capitol Hill. We're joined by a couple of them this evening. Senator Warren Rudman of New Hampshire, Senator Tim Wirth of Colorado. Tim Wirth is in Little Rock, Arkansas. We'll get to him momentarily. We understand Warren Rudman is at WBZ in Boston. Senator Rudman, good evening. The new faces that are going to be a part of the 103rd Congress.
Helped in a few of them. It seems to me that they're running pretty much as individuals. They have run as outsiders. They have not connected themselves to any specific issues, and generally there's been a lot of demagoguery in these campaigns. The question is going to tell that.
Okay, Senator Rudman, we'll talk a little bit later. I want to go to Little Rock, Arkansas right now, where Senator Tim Wirth is standing by. Senator Wirth, good evening.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm fine, thank you. The old saying about be careful of what you want because you might get it. Democrats have talked about being able to control both the executive and legislative branches. It might be goodbye divided government. Does that prospect frighten you?
Well, I think it's a very good thing for the country. There's no longer going to have blame of people pointing up and down Pennsylvania Avenue, Republicans and Democrats, the Congress to the White House. The responsibility is going to be with the Democratic Party. I think also the Congress, I listened very carefully to Warren Rudman's good comments. I think the Congress is so desirous of leadership. It has not had any for a decade. And I think that's going to be enormously helpful. I think Bill Clinton's going to come in not only with a national mandate, it looks like that tonight, but he's also going to come in with the kind of direction that the Congress is looking for. And that's going to make a big, big difference. I think it's very positive for the country.
But you stepped away in disgust and frustration. Bill Clinton's theme was change on Capitol Hill. Do you suspect we'll see real change?
Well, I think we're going to see real change. I think that's got to start. Clearly, the Clinton program is going to be health care, education, and putting a floor under this economy. Going to move right away as well on campaign finance reform, I would expect, and family and medical leave program. There'll be motor voter legislation, get a number of things going that really demonstrate the fact that there is a change out there. I think the Congress is going to.
And so that is something that did pass within, I think, his first 2 years in office was the motor voter reform. In every state in the union, you can register to vote when you get your driver's license at the DMV or whatever. That's what I've done every single time I've moved.
To be eager for that. It's going to be eager for the kind of leadership and program and the kind of change that Bill Clinton's going to bring. That's what the American public, I think, is voting overwhelmingly on today, Brian.
Okay. All right. Senator Tim Wirth, thank you. We'll talk as the evening moves
Thank
along.
you. See you later.
Appreciate it. Let's move it on over to Katie right now.
Brian, of course, we heard an awful lot about gridlock between Congress and the president during the course of this campaign. And interestingly enough, voters today, by better than a 2-to-1 margin, told us they want the president and Congress to be from the same party. Tom?
Thank you. We just heard from Jim Miklaszewski, who is one of our White House correspondents, of course. He's down in Houston.
That is actually very unusual. Voters are very fickle, and they usually want divided government, and then they blame divided government for not doing anything. But typically when people want something done, they want one party in control, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. But that's a little bit more unusual.
Houston. He saw the president in passing. He said, "How are you, Mr. President?" The president responded, "I've been better. We'll see. I've been happier. Exit polls don't vote. People do. It does not look good." The president now is having some private time with his friends in Houston. We do want to remind you that we do not project a state until all or most of those polls have closed. We also want to remind you that the Electoral College can elect a president before we get all the way across the country. And for those of you who are living, especially in the Midwest, the Mountain, and the West Coast states, it is important for you to go to the polls tonight, however the outcome of this presidential race. Also, I should tell you that I can escape only on a technicality. Margaret Truman, of course, was only a child, but I did not think of her as a child when she was living in the White House. That's the technicality, folks. We'll be back with more after this.
In a world of sweeping changes, there is one certainty. The financial strength of the Prudential, rock solid in securities, insurance, and real estate.
There's something pure about a...
Ooh, pop-up headlights. That's not a Miata, but still, it's just seeing car advertisements from this era that had, where the cars had pop-up headlights.
A real sports coupe. It's 1 part power, 1 part control, and one stunningly simple piece of sculpture.
Got a friend who really wants one of these Ford Probes.
And at a time when most sports coupes have sold their soul for a few gadgets, isn't it time for a car like this? The all-new 24-valve Ford Probe GT. Have you driven a Ford lately?
You're just in time. If you hurry to Red Lobster, you can get one of our 3 new trios. Enjoy it.
Thanks.
Like our seafood trio, sweet snow crab, shrimp scampi, and broiled fish. It's just $9.99. It's so good. We've also got a big new shrimp trio and a new mixed grill. 3 trios you'll love for just $9.99. So hurry in for something great. Tonight at Red Lobster.
We chose AT&T because our 800 service is our front door. If it shuts down, we shut down.
Desperately want. They've been in and out of there. 21 votes on the electoral side in Ohio. In Kentucky, which we've not been able to project yet, here's the raw vote as we have been counting it thus far. 80% of the vote approaching that in. As you can tell, it is too close to call. It's a very, very tight race. In Kentucky, about, 20,000 votes separating them, just 2 percentage points at this hour. So we'll be watching Kentucky carefully. Both candidates were in there twice in the closing days of the campaign. They went to Paducah, Kentucky, and other stops because that was one of the crucial battlegrounds, the middle border states of Kentucky. Now we want to show you some voting that has been going on in Macomb County. This is the bowling alley, actually. They go directly from the voting place to the bowling alley. They know how to live in Macomb County, Michigan. And there's Fred Briggs. Fred, how are you?
Fine, Tom. Well, the polls are about to close here in 15 minutes. We have some voters we thought you'd like to find. And Just in this county alone, this bellwether county, supposedly of former Reagan Democrats or Reagan Democrats, here are a lot of 8,500 new voters, mostly young, and this is Cindy Galton. She's one of them.
Hi.
You voted for Bill Clinton. Why?
I voted for Bill Clinton because he's more in tune with the younger generation and the needs that we have for our future and for our children.
Was this a sudden decision, or?
No, it was pretty much all along I decided to vote for him.
And here's Barbara Szymanski. You were going to vote for Clinton, you say, but what did you wind up doing?
Yes, I was voting for Clinton all the way up till this morning, and then I decided to vote for Perot because I figure, well, I voted Democrat, I voted Republican, and I figure maybe a businessman can do what a politician can't.
Lest you get the idea that this is all going for Clinton or Perot.
I wonder if she voted for Trump.
We'd like to speak to you, Rick Strobel. You voted for George Bush. Can you step up a little bit?
Certainly.
Why? Did you have
I have a lot of faith, never a doubt. I really believe that the economy is going to be on an upswing very soon. I think all economic indicators point to that. I didn't like all the negativity that there was in the campaign. I think we're painting a much bleaker picture about America. I think I'm living the American dream, and I resented that when they said the American dream is dead. I believe if we just stay the course, to borrow it from the president, I think we're going to do something.
Well, what do you think is going to happen in Michigan tonight?
This is a swing state. It's very important, and we had a very good turnout from what I understand, but I think it's a toss-up. I think what's happening here in Michigan, we have a lot of unemployment. The auto industry right now is down. If people would buy American cars, maybe that wouldn't be a problem. But that's the whole thing. I think when they talk about spending, let's do it ourselves. Let's spend our money. Let's build houses. Let's buy cars.
Okay, well, thanks very much. You got an idea. There's hardly unity in this county. Tom?
Thank you very much, Fred Briggs in Macomb County at the bowling alley tonight. Michigan is one of those states that has voted Republican in the last 3 elections, 18 electoral votes. The polls closed there in about 12 minutes now altogether. This has been called the Year of the Woman, but a woman in Texas today took it to the extreme. She was on the way to the hospital in labor pains when she directed her husband to make a detour to the polling place. The election administrators came to the curbside as onlookers looked on in a combination of shock and horror and amazement. She cast her ballot and then went on to the hospital to have her baby. We'll be back with more after this.
Decision 92 election.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know that any polling place would extend that courtesy today anywhere. I don't know.
Tonight is being sponsored in part by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? It's more than a question. It's an answer. And by the Business Services Division of MCI.
Bush in 1988, about 44%. How are they behaving today? Well, only about 1/4 of those so-called Reagan Democrats voted for Bush today. 56% voted for Clinton. Incidentally, that's about the same number that voted for Michael Dukakis 4 years ago. And only 1 in 5 gave their vote to Ross Perot. So what does this all mean? Well, Bill Clinton held on to about the same number of Reagan Democrats as Michael Dukakis did in 1988, but apparently Ross Perot is taking a big chunk of support from these voters away from George Bush. This may prove to be key to the outcome of this election. So in other words, some of those Reagan Democrats are now becoming Perot independents. Tom?
Thank you, Katie. We were listening to Warren Rudman talk about that new House and how it may behave in the next couple of years. Dave McCurdy, who's a member of the House right now, the congressman from Oklahoma, said they'll be carrying pitchforks and torches to storm the castle. John Chancellor, is that your assessment of what is likely to happen?
Yeah, but what the interesting thing is that they'll need permanent staff members on the Hill to show them where the castle is. That these people are going to go up there. They're all going to be newcomers to the Hill. The staffs are going to be more important than they are now, and they're far too important now. All these innocents are going to be coming in from all over the country, and the happiest campers on Capitol Hill tonight have to be that permanent civilization of staff members on the committees, the legislative aides, the administrative aides who will say, this is what you ought to do.
All right, we'll be back in a few moments. Polls closing at 8 o'clock, 205 electoral votes. We're getting down to it. Good evening once again. We're now getting to the crucial part of the evening with a substantial number of polls closing in states around the country, representing altogether 205 electoral votes. And the way it's shaping up right now, this could be another passage year as it was in 1960 when the torch was passed to a new generation, as it was in 1980 when a new Republican Party took over with Ronald Reagan. Here are the polls closing. As you can see, all of those states now, the polls are closing at this hour. And based on our analysis of interviews with the voters that we have seen in many of those states, we can now make these projections for Bill Clinton. All good news for him. 23 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. In Illinois, 22 electoral votes. The battleground state of Michigan, which has gone Republican the last 3 times, 18 electoral votes. In New Jersey, 15 electoral votes. Bill Clinton the winner there. In Massachusetts, which has been safely for the Democrats in recent elections, that goes to Bill Clinton's column. Missouri, 10. Maryland, 11. Connecticut, 8. Now, Connecticut is the ancestral home of the George Bush family, obviously. And Bill Clinton is our projected winner in Connecticut tonight as well. And this will not go over well with the Bush family. They, of course, have their summer home at Walker's Point in Maine. We are projecting that Maine is the winner for Bill Clinton. Now, one of those electoral votes could go to Ross Perot, because in Maine and Nebraska, they divide their electoral votes by the congressional districts, and there's a possibility that Ross Perot could pick off one of those electoral votes, but then, after all, he spent $60 million. He ought to get something for it. In the District of Columbia, which has been safely Democratic as well, 3 electoral votes to Bill Clinton. What does that mean now on our national map? We want to show you as we begin to color that in red. As you can see, the lone state that we've been able to call for President Bush tonight is the state of Indiana, Dan Quayle's home state, and it's been one of the most safely Republican states in this century for the Republicans. Electoral votes, 270 required. Bill Clinton now beginning very swiftly to close in on that number with 151. And remember, it's only 8 o'clock in the evening in the East. Polls will remain open across the country. We remind you to go vote. Let's take a look now at the national popular vote as it has been counted so far. Only 4% of it in so far. George Bush can take some comfort, some solace in the fact that he continues to lead in that, but by a very small margin. And that, of course, if these current trends continue, that too will change during the course of the evening. As you look at that map, Bill Clinton is in red, but George Bush is bleeding, in a manner of speaking, at this hour. Those are states that he had to have to win this election.
Well, blue should be the appropriate color. When Fred Malek of the Bush headquarters was on our program here a few minutes ago, he said that they could win if they held on to the South, they held on to the mountain areas, and if they held on to states like Ohio, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Well, New Jersey, according to our projection, is gone. Connecticut is gone. If New Jersey is going, it means that Ohio is in peril for the Republicans. It's beginning to look like a bit of a wipeout, Tom.
Yeah, John, these are Democrats coming home, in a matter of speaking. In Michigan, Clinton is winning the Ronald Reagan Democrats, so-called. Those are white, male, conservative Democrats by a margin of 3-1. Unions voting for Bill Clinton 3-1. In New Jersey, blacks, Hispanics, and women are giving Clinton the edge at this hour. So we are seeing a really historic shift once again in American voting patterns.
I don't think, and the early indications we had were that the white male Reagan Union Democrats were not behaving too differently. But I think all of the other elements of those Democrats who went to Reagan in 1980 and in 1984 are now beginning to split apart.
Thank you, John. We're watching a lot of Senate races as well.
Well, one of those instances, Tom, where people have crossed racial lines to vote, it seems, is in Illinois, where Carol Moseley Braun tops our list of projected winners in Illinois. She divided the white vote evenly with her opponent, Rich Williamson, and assumes the seat of Alan Dixon, who she defeated in the primary. The consummate candidate in this year of the woman, Carol Moseley Braun becoming the first black Democrat, the first African-American woman elected to the United States Senate. In Alabama, Richard Shelby, another member of that freshman class of '86, a man who won a tough primary, had an easy time of it tonight, defeating Richard Sellers, our former Washington lobbyist.
And Richard Shelby, just so you know, a lot of Democrats switched over to being Republicans in 1994 when the Republicans took control of Congress, and Richard Shelby was one of them.
In Connecticut, Chris Dodd goes back to Washington for a third term. Initially, he was seen as one of those who was quite vulnerable, but instead ran a very good campaign and defeated Brooke Johnson, a millionaire businessman who we must assume will go back to his textile business. In Kansas, no surprise, Bob Dole, Minority Leader of the Senate, beats Gloria Odell in a race that she had characterized as Gloria versus Goliath. Well, Goliath won this one fairly easily. Bob Dole, very popular in the state of Kansas, and to a certain extent ran away from George Bush. In Maryland, Barbara Mikulski, another member of the freshman 86 class, beat Alan Keyes, one of a very small number of influential African-American Republicans and one who had feuded somewhat with the Senate Campaign Finance Committee. Mikulski with an easy victory. In North Dakota, Byron Dorgan, again a Democrat, winning the retired seat vacated by Democrat Kent Conrad. He defeated Steve Sidness, Conrad running in a separate race. And in Oklahoma, Don Nichols, as expected, beat Steve Lewis, a lawyer, a former Speaker of the Oklahoma House. Nichols won this one fairly easily. He's very young, very conservative, got an awful lot of attention this summer as the Republican who chaired the GOP Platform Committee. Interestingly enough, we had talk going into this night of all the anti-incumbency fever, but so far we have been able to project 11 Senate races, and 10 of those 11, I should say 9 of those 11, have gone to the incumbent. The other 2 were vacant seats. One incumbent who is sitting on the bubble still is in Pennsylvania. It's a race we're watching. It's the one that has Arlen Specter matched up against Lynn Yackel. We want to go to both their headquarters right now up in Pennsylvania, starting by going to Yackel's headquarters and checking in with Bob Hager. Bob, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Well, the excitement's starting to pick up here on word that the race is close. Could be something important going on. Arlen Specter in trouble, a veteran.
Governor's races for you at this hour. In the state of Missouri, the winner is Mel Carnahan. He was the lieutenant governor in 1988, the only Democrat holding statewide office in that state, and he beat William Webster of the controversial Webster abortion case in the state of Missouri. In Delaware, Democrat, the winner there, that's Tom Carper. He's a 5-term congressman. The sitting governor decided to run for Congress, and Mr. Carper decided to come back, and the Democrats gain the state. We're back with Decision 92 now. Kentucky politicians used to be fond of saying that their state was the home of fast horses, fine bourbon, and beautiful women, and then they decided that was no longer politically correct. We can tell you at this hour that Kentucky is the home of Bill Clinton and 8 electoral votes that go into his column. This is a big, big win for Bill Clinton. That was one of those battleground middle border states. He goes into the Clinton column after having voted with the Republicans the last 3 times. And as you can see, we color in the state of Kentucky. Only Indiana so far tonight for George Bush, according to our projection. What does that mean in terms of electoral votes? In Kentucky, there are 8 altogether. Bill Clinton now has climbed up to 159. He has been on a steady ascendancy. And George Bush is stuck at 12 at this hour with only Indiana in his column. The popular vote still at 4%. George Bush continues to hold a narrow lead. That will be changing given these projections that we are seeing so far tonight. So that's an important win for Bill Clinton. It was a state that they both contested very strongly. Tim Russert, some thoughts?
Tom Brokaw, I've just got off the phone with some Democratic Party analysts who talked about the Electoral College lock. They believe that the lock's not only been broken, that the vault's been pushed wide open. They're pointing out to 1988 figures, Tom, amongst independent voters in Michigan. George Bush won 61% in 88, 33% tonight. In Pennsylvania, Catholics in 88, 51%, 28% tonight. And the other figure they point to, independent voters in Illinois, 55% in 88, 25% now. In Michigan, Tom, they have closed the polls officially. The lines are still so long. They have voting inspectors going outside with books, letting people still vote. Tom Brokaw.
Tim Russert, I'm not surprised that things are changing so swiftly in this country. We tend to forget here as we live in Fortress America what has happened in the last 4 years around the world. 4 years ago, there was still a Soviet Union. 4 years ago, there was still a Berlin Wall. 4 years ago, there was still an Eastern Europe and a Soviet bloc, and things have changed profoundly in the rest of the world. And it looks tonight like they're beginning to change here as well.
Tom, we talked a little bit earlier about the issue of trust and to what extent George Bush's argument was compromised by how people thought of him with regards to his true role in the Iran-Contra affair and also to a certain extent Iraq-Gate. And Katie Kirk has some answers on that. Katie?
Well, Brian, if you didn't hear an awful lot about trust during this campaign, you were living under a rock. Of course, George Bush questioned Bill Clinton about his draft status, while Bill Clinton questioned Bush's role in the Iran-Contra affair and in Iraq-Gate as well. So we put it to our voters in our national poll. Were the candidates telling the truth? Well, on Clinton's draft record, they were split. 43% told us Bill Clinton has told the truth. 50% said no, he has not told the truth. Of course, of those who believe that Bill Clinton didn't tell the truth, Bush won big, not surprisingly. But the focus on trust during this campaign.
And so I'll make a comment on this. This is kind of one of those trends I was talking about that started with Clinton. It's like, yeah, a lot of people believed he was a draft dodger, but if that was a big, important issue to you, you were never going to vote for Clinton anyway. But people who didn't care about that issue, even if they thought he was a draft dodger, they voted for him anyway. And it's the same thing with Trump. I'm not saying like he was or wasn't a draft dodger. There's a lot of stuff going on back then, but it's not an issue. It's an issue that a lot of like older Americans care about, obviously, but it's not an issue that it's not an issue. It's not a crippling issue for any candidate who runs on it, because obviously, George Bush was a veteran from World War II, and that didn't really Clinton not serving at all didn't hurt him in this election. The same thing, somebody tried to bring the issue up with Trump, but nobody really cared. It didn't really go anywhere.
May have, in fact, backfired on the Republicans who emphasized it so much. Only about 1/4 of those we talked with today think Bush has told the truth about Iran-Contra, while almost 70% say he hasn't. And it's a little surprised that Clinton has a commanding lead among those who don't think Bush has come clean on Iran-Contra. While voters told us they don't necessarily believe either candidates, it's interesting to note that it really didn't matter to most voters when we asked them about what was important when it came to selecting a president. Well, only 14% said it was trust. Right.
All right, Katie, thanks very much. We've still got lots more to get to on this Tuesday evening. Decision 92, our election night coverage continues right after this.
I grew up with Bryant Gumbel being the host of Today in the 1990s, and I like how he had his shoulder kind of like curved a little bit, and then he was picking up a cup of coffee or water or whatever to drink. Like there's a certain vibe to that I really like.
If your business relies on 800 service, you may think of your phone line as your lifeline. So choosing AT&T 800 service is important. With another carrier, you could lose more.
Decision 92 election night continues.
We're back now, and there are a number of states that have gone into the Bill Clinton column at this hour. Only one for George Bush, but there are some important states out there that we're not able to make a projection on, even though the polls have closed. The polls have closed, but we've not called these states. We're beginning to move into the heartland now. That's North Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, down south. You can see there's Alabama and Mississippi, Florida, the Carolinas, also Virginia, Tennessee. That's the home state of Al Gore. In just a few moments, by the way, the polls will be closing in Arkansas, and we are not able to call up in New England as well. Here's the electoral vote at this hour. We're going to take one away from Bill Clinton. It's not an arbitrary decision. What has happened is that in one of those main congressional districts where they award the electoral votes district by district, it is now too close to make the call, so we take one away. There's the possibility before the night is out that Ross Perot will have won one of those electoral votes in the state of Maine. They've been breathing pretty easy all day long in Little Rock, Arkansas tonight, and they must be now beginning to hyperventilate given the way this election map is beginning to show up in their favor. NBC's Andrea Mitchell is in the Arkansas Capitol. Andrea?
Well, the governor himself still says that he doesn't want to be too premature in declaring victory. He was very relaxed tonight. He went out for a jog in the rain, said that he had, in fact, napped for 3.5 hours without intending to, sitting and watching a John Wayne movie with his wife and daughter. But the staff is all really breaking out the celebration. They believe that this is not only, a small victory. They think that it is going to be a very large mandate for change, mandate for Bill Clinton's programs. They are very well aware, though, Tom, that he has promised a lot that he'll have to deliver, and he's going to have to work with a new Congress.
All right, Andrea Mitchell, we're going to go to John Cochran now, who's your counterpart, and in the Bush campaign, he's in Houston, Texas tonight, where my guess is that the mood is quite the contrary. John?
This is Cochran.
John, you're on. Hello, John.
Hello, Tom.
Hi.
Just talking with some of the folks here. They're saying that, like the president said earlier to Jim Miklaszewski, exit polls don't vote, only real people vote. But the bad news is starting to link in. I'll tell you, the bad news is not a surprise to the Bush people. One of their top people who follows these polls told me on Sunday, he said, look, I'm very concerned that the president's not going to get 100 electoral votes. He said, we'll feel very badly if that happens because we consider anything above 100 votes not a blowout. We don't want Bill Clinton just to blow us away. Now they're concerned, Tom.
John Cochran, thank you very much. It's worth pointing out that the Democrats in the Clinton campaign have learned all of their techniques from the Republican Party in the last 12 years, especially in reaching all the way back to 1968. Here's some good news for President Bush now. We're able to project the state of South Carolina. It's 8 electoral votes for George Bush. So on our big national map at this hour, we'll give Bush a second state that we can color in blue. Down south in South Carolina, that's the home of Strom Thurmond, of course. And the electoral vote then ticks up for President Bush to 20. 158 for Bill Clinton, 270 are required. We now have enough polls closed to get to that number. We'll see how long it takes. Let's take a look at the national vote. We're still holding at 4% in the popular vote counted so far, only a point separating Bush and Clinton. Ross Perot holding at 15%. If he continues there, of course, that would be a very strong showing for a third-party candidate. But after all, this is the man who gave us slow dancing Lawrence Welk music.
I was looking up something just recently when they took away that one vote from Bill Clinton temporarily. And I was saying Maine was one of Perot's best states, and he came close to winning one of the congressional districts up there and picking off an electoral vote. He didn't do it, but I was correct in that Maine, too, was pretty close. The 2nd Congressional District of Maine. It looks like Bill Clinton won that congressional district with about 38% of the popular vote, and then Perot was actually second with 33. So he lost it by a little bit less than 5 points if you carry out the decimals, but that's why it was somewhat close. They hadn't counted all the votes yet, and Maine is just one of those states that's difficult to predict, especially in the 2nd Congressional District where it's more rural.
$1,000 briefcases and alligator shoes. We'll be back after this.
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
Good evening once again. If this has been a campaign of hope versus experience, of change versus trust, at this hour, change and hope are the big winners based on what we're seeing so far here tonight, Bryant Gumbel. It's a real generational confrontation, and the younger generation is taking the older generation to the docks at the moment.
And I know you've got some more poll closings and some more electoral projections, but the news just keeps getting better for Bill Clinton.
It does, and this is no big surprise. Only one state is closing its polls at 8:30 tonight. I don't know how they had time to vote in Arkansas. They've been so busy celebrating in advance of all this. 6 electoral votes. The polls just closed. We're able to make a projection in Arkansas based on our interviews and the analysis of those interviews with voters as they left the polls today. Bill Clinton, hometown guy, 5 times elected governor of that state, grew up there, became a Rhodes Scholar, Boys Nation, did all the right things in the eyes of most Arkansas voters, and today they gave him their votes as he ran for president of the United States, the first man from that state to do so. What does that mean in terms of electoral votes now? This is the important number, of course, 164 for Bill Clinton, 270 required. George Bush with only South Carolina and Indiana on his asset side, as Ross Perot might say. Texas, Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, and Virginia representing 105 electoral votes. All the polls have closed in those states, but they are still too close to call. At one point, Ross Perot referred to Arkansas as just a small unit. Just because you ran the corner store doesn't mean that you could run Kmart. That was just one of the many pithy things that he had to say in the course of this campaign, John Chancellor.
He'll go on saying pithy things. I've been looking at the figures here. He's running about 15% nationally. From Vermont to Florida, he's in the double digits in most of these states, and so far we haven't seen him fall very far behind. So he will be able to go around and say, I didn't win the election, but I did better than George Wallace in 1968, who got 13.5% of the vote, and I sure beat John Anderson in 1980, who got 6% of the vote. I could almost hear him saying that.
John, we have a projection. Good news for the president. He was able to hang on to the state of Oklahoma in the Southwest. NBC now is able to project the state of Oklahoma with its 8 electoral votes. That goes into the Bush column. We want to tell you what that means on our map. First of all, blue. As we begin to move into stronger Bush territory, he could take part in all of that. He gets up to 28 electoral votes at this hour, with Bill Clinton at 164. And the national vote, we're now up to 8%. And George Bush continues to hold a 1-point lead over Bill Clinton. We want to tell you, however, that the important vote is the electoral vote, and that popular vote will change as well in the course of this evening if the electoral trend continues as it is right now. And the man who believes that it will probably continue in that direction is with us at this hour. He is Ron Brown, who's the Democratic National Chairman. Mr. Brown, we have been reminding voters in the West all evening long that they should continue to vote, also in the mountain states in the central time zone, but you must be feeling an enormous...
Well, for Clinton in Ohio. And no surprise here in Arkansas. Dale Bumpers, a winner. That makes it 11 for 11 Senate incumbents. He defeats Mike Huckabee, a 36-year-old Baptist minister with no national political experience. He's not likely to get any anytime soon. There are some other races that bear...
That was incorrect.
Are watching, though, in which incumbents are very much on the bubble. We'd like to take a look at some of those in South Carolina. Ernst Fritz Hollings, a man who, oddly enough, is running as an outsider, even though he was sent to the Senate first in '66, is holding on against Thomas Hartnett, former three-term congressman from South Carolina, who in fact ran the George Bush campaign 4 years ago. How much of an outsider did Hollings want to run as? He was quoted as saying, if those boys up in Washington cared half as much about your checkbook as they do their own, we could get this country moving again. Well, he might get his chance because right now he's out in front. In North Carolina, Terry Sanford holding on, now trailing with 13% of the vote counted by a 4% margin to Locke Faircloth, a man who was described for a time as the stealth candidate, which tells you a little bit about what people thought of his campaign there. But Terry Sanford, who had some recent heart surgery, 40% of those in exit polls are noting that they were concerned about Sanford's health. And in Georgia, Weish Fowler leading right now with 14% of the vote counted, leading over former Peace Corps Director Paul Coverdale. Remember, as we watch this, that Fowler must win by 51% in Georgia to avoid a runoff. Texas Senator Phil Gramm is standing by with us right now from the Capitol. Senator, good evening.
Good evening, Brian.
You're watching these Senate returns come in as well as the presidential returns. Surprised, disappointed?
Well, at the moment, we've got a lot of tough races. I noticed you haven't called Connecticut, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. Those are all in the period of meeting.
Gore. What does that mean in terms of electoral votes?
It's been prolonged. I think those things have had an impact. I think the candidates that have presented a vision as to what they want to do appear to be doing well tonight. Obviously, this was not a time to run on the status quo.
All right, Senator Phil Gramm, thanks very much. We'll talk a little bit later. Appreciate it. Tom?
No surprise here. NBC News now projecting the state of Tennessee. The winner there, Bill Clinton. It is the home state of his running mate, Al Gore, a senator from that state. They were called the Yuppie ticket, the double Bubba ticket, which didn't quite fit somehow. They strike me more at the student body president, the football cap.
By the way, that was one of the reasons their ticket did so strongly, relatively speaking, in the South and in the Midwest, was because it was just, you know, two good old Southern boys running as on the Democratic ticket, and the Democrats did well doing that.
Captain. Anyhow, 11 electoral votes in Tennessee. That goes into the Clinton column now. It is beginning to fill in that map in red for Clinton and Gore. What does that mean in terms of electoral votes? 175 for Bill Clinton, 28 for George Bush, none for Perot so far. The national vote now, we've got 10% of it in. and Clinton now has eased into the lead, and if this trend continues, that will remain very much the same, and we'll be watching how big the popular vote margin may be for Bill Clinton if he continues. Not good news for Dan Quayle. In Indiana, his home state, they did win it for the Bush-Quayle ticket, but in the exit poll, who better qualified to take over as president if necessary? 53% said that he is cherished since he was a teenager. Actually, he is a consummate politician. He's been involved in political life most of his adult years and even his teenage years. These are the states that we've not yet been able to call. The race is just simply too close there. They are important states, especially to George Bush. Florida, down south, up north in North Dakota, Kansas, Texas is one of his home states. So we want to show you what the popular vote is, to show you the dilemma for our wizards in the back room who are trying to make these calls. We got 6% of the vote in Texas. Bill Clinton with a narrow lead at this hour. I don't know where those votes come from, so it's impossible to say how it will turn out. But anyhow, the analysts say that they cannot yet make a projection in the state of Texas. That would be a big blow to George Bush, of course. In Florida, 6% of the vote is in there. His son was the Republican chairman in the state of Florida, and we are not able to make a call in Florida, even though George Bush has a 7-point lead.
Of the seniors are voting for Bill Clinton. It is his best age group amongst the electorate. They are convinced that is because of the issue of health care. Our exit poll bears that out. 1 year ago tonight, Tom, Harris Wofford knocked off Dick Thornburgh, the Attorney General of the United States, largely on the issue of health care. They thought that would be a wake-up call for the Bush administration. It looks like Bill Clinton has capitalized on the issue of health care. It is doing very well with senior citizens. They tell me in Little Rock that health care will be a top priority in the first 3 months if Bill Clinton wins this race tonight.
Thank you, Tim Russert. Standing by in Texas right now is someone who was a great friend to Bill Clinton in the closing days of this campaign. I think that I can say without fear of retribution from her, she's the big mama of Texas politics these days. That's Ann Richards, who is the current governor, has a very high approval rating down there. What do you think, Governor Richards? Are you going to win this state for Governor Clinton before the night is out?
Yeah, we're going to win it. You know, when I saw you up there at the first debate, you asked me, could we win Texas, and I told you I thought we could. I think we're going to win it by maybe 2 points. The big variable for...
That was the last time a Democrat won a statewide office in Texas. She was the last Democratic governor. So she would lose re-election in 1994 to a man named George W. Bush.
For us, it was really hard to figure this time was Ross Perot. And Ross is, I think, going to come in somewhere around 20 points, in which case we ought to win by 2.
So he's taking away from George Bush, in effect.
He took away from George Bush, and he also took away from Bill Clinton. And I don't think we're going to know for several days until it sifts out. And we do some analysis exactly how much he took from each candidate, but I think he took from both of them.
Texas has been in a turnaround, Governor Richards. The unemployment rate has dropped about 0.5 point in the last 4 years. People are feeling better about their future down there. George Bush claims it as a home state. Why did they turn on George Bush in your judgment?
We began an organization here 2 years ago, Tom, when I made the race for governor, and we have kept that organization intact, and we worked it very hard in the sense that we made people feel that this Democratic Party that they have now chosen to endorse and vote in is a party of the future. I'm very serious when I say to you that the old image of the Democratic Party in this nation, I hope, is gone. And the new image, and that is an image of people who are fiscally responsible, but people who really do care for those who need jobs, who need health care, that we're going to take care of those needs, but we're going to do it in a manner in which the people can afford it. And I think that that's telling all across the nation in this election.
You think that Bill Clinton will reach out to some Republicans for his new administration as well if he wins tonight?
Well, I don't have any idea. I talked to him a while last night. We were together on the plane as late as 1 a.m. this morning in Fort Worth, and we talked in general about what needs to be done in the administration, but we didn't talk specifically about people in the cabinet or anything like that.
All right, thank you very much, Governor Ann Richards. It's always a
Great
pleasure
to talk to you. Tell without his beard.
Oh, yeah, he is. We all agree with that. That's a consensus point of view. We didn't have to have any exit polls or anything.
Governor, thanks very much. Right. You joined my wife and my agent in that opinion.
Right,
I appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah, we chipped in and bought him some youth ways, and they worked to good effect.
I appreciate that very much. Let's go ahead and give you a gubernatorial projection right now. We can tell you that Republican Steve Merrill in New Hampshire has won the seat vacated by Judd Gregg, who's running for a Senate seat in New Hampshire. He turned back Congresswoman Deborah.
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
Good evening once again. I'm back here with Bryant Gumbel, and Bryant, at this hour, Bill Clinton is closing in very rapidly on the magic number of 270 electoral votes. In 1960, John Kennedy said a torch was passed to a new generation. Tonight, it's a whole bonfire. That's the way the electoral map is going. We want to show you what's going on in Little Rock at this hour. In the capital of Arkansas, they're beginning to assemble there. We expect that Bill Clinton and Hillary sometime in the next hour will probably make an appearance, because at about that time that we'll be able to make a projection. We'll remind you, however, that the polls are open in many parts of the country. If they are in your state, we urge you to go out and exercise your right to vote. The electoral vote, of course, is based on the representatives and the senators from those states, and that's how they get to the total. Here are the states in which the polls have just now closed at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. 99 electoral votes altogether. Arizona, Colorado, Louisiana, Minnesota, Nebraska, New Mexico, New York, Rhode Island, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. And George Bush had to have a good chunk of those states to stay competitive tonight. And the fact of the matter is, he is not getting them. We're now prepared to make more projections for Bill Clinton that will take him close to the 270 marker. He is the projected winner in New York. No surprise there. 33 electoral votes. As one of Clinton's most important states, it stayed rock solid for him. Minnesota has been in the Democratic column. 10 electoral votes there. Bill Clinton is the winner there as well. It voted for Michael Dukakis last time around. Here's a winner in the Rocky Mountain states. Colorado, 8 electoral votes. Perot was a big factor, taking away from George Bush. And now let's go to New Mexico. 5 electoral votes in New Mexico. Last voted Democratic in 1964. It had gone with the winner every time but once since becoming a state 80 years ago. It went with Gerald Ford in 1976. Rhode Island, only 4 electoral votes. They all go to Bill Clinton at this hour. And the state of Delaware, which has been another one of those bellwether states, voting with the winner every time since 1952. Tonight it believes that the winner will be Bill Clinton. It has given him 3 electoral votes. So as we show you on the map now, all of those states will go red for Bill Clinton. The blue states belong to George Bush. What does that mean in terms of what's happening for George Bush? Well, he can win one state that we can put into his column at the closing at 9 o'clock now, and that is the state of Nebraska with its 5 electoral votes. Nebraska last voted Democratic in 64 for Lyndon Johnson. Here it is in the map now. The blue belongs to George Bush, of course. All the red parts of the map will go to Bill Clinton. The electoral vote, we're now 238 electoral votes. As you can see, 270 are required. Bill Clinton now is within easy reach. There are some big states that are still out there that he is very much in the hunt for. John Chancellor, this could be a historic evening for Bill Clinton.
Well, it's going to be a historic evening, I think, in the history of covering elections. You know, this is quite early for something going as quickly as this. As rushing across the country, the way the Clinton vote is. In 1960, we weren't able here at NBC to call Jack Kennedy's election until around 11 in the morning, as I recall. And we were up all night. Now, it seems to me, within about the next half hour or so, Tom, you'll be able to project our winner as Bill Clinton. And there are a number of small states that could do it. Do we suppose that Texas could do it? I think that all by itself could do it. But I'm not sure he's going to carry Texas.
You know, John, the fact of the matter is that one of the things that served him very well in the course of this campaign, whatever you think about his ideological beliefs or his plan for the future, is that as a stand-up campaigner and politician, he is almost matchless. They knocked him bloody a couple of times here in the New York primary, again in New Hampshire with the Jennifer Flowers episode, but he was the Energizer Rabbit of presidential politics. He just kept on coming, and they could not knock him over.
Tom, his body was identified as dead on arrival in the New Hampshire primary, and he got up from that grave and moved on to where he is tonight. It's quite a remarkable story.
He so loves campaigning that at the end, the reporters were yelling at him at 2 in the morning, get back in the car, get back in the car. He would not stop shaking hands.
He, in fact, didn't get back to Little Rock until, I think, 11 o'clock this morning. His day started with a rally at Stapleton Airport in Denver, and then he moved on to Little Rock only after that. One of the stories that John is going to be exploring a little bit later, I'm sure, is the relationship that Bill Clinton, if the numbers continue to go his way, is likely to have with the 103rd Congress. That Congress, at least on the Senate side, is looking very much like the 102nd, because we can now make it 13 for 13 for incumbents on the Senate side. We have some more projections. Starting in Colorado, where Ben Nighthorse Campbell has won the vacant seat, turning back Terry Considine, a Colorado state senator. Interesting in this race, Campbell becoming the only Native American elected to the Senate. In this race, their military records were partly an issue. Campbell did not correct the misimpression that he had somehow been captured behind enemy lines in Korea. Considine perhaps could have capitalized on it, but he had his own problems by saying he was first ineligible to serve in Vietnam and then later had to confess that he sought and received a student deferment. Campbell the winner in Colorado. In Arizona, John McCain wins a second term, turning back the challenge not only of Clara Sargent, but also ex-Governor Evan Meekin. Although McCain was tainted somewhat by the SNL reprimand as one of the Keating Five, he wins handily in Arizona. And in South Dakota, Tom Daschle has defeated Charlene Harr. Daschle, a Democrat, defeated the only woman Republican who was running for the Senate. Harr, very conservative, was against abortion, was for gun control, was for term limits. She demanded to be called Mrs. Harr, a longtime GOP party activist, but not getting elected tonight. And so, the new Senate, what does it look like? We told you when the night began, 57-43 Democrats, with them having to defend more seats than the Republicans. At this point, they are enjoying a 50-32 edge, with 18 yet to be determined, 7 of those being defended by Democrats, 11 to be defended by the GOP. If there is a magic number to watch for on the Senate side tonight, it is the number 60. That's what Democrats had hoped to get to, that to make the Senate filibuster-proof, allow them to control the legislative agenda in the upper house. Katie, what do you got for us?
Well, Bryant, while you say it may be good news tonight for Senate incumbents, some of those winners may not be eligible to run for re-election in the future. Why? 2 words: term limits. Never before have so many states considered a single issue. In fact, 14 states have some kind of term limit initiative on the ballots this year. Of course, this is given largely to the anti-incumbent mood that is sweeping the country. All of them would restrict members of Congress to 2 terms or 12 years, and House members to anywhere from 3 to 6 terms or 6 to 12 years, depending upon what state you're talking about. Now, NBC News is projecting that in Florida, Ohio, and Missouri, term limits will pass by nearly 3 to 1 in all those states. So if the sentiment isn't throw the bums out right now, it is at least don't let the bums stay in office too long. Also passing by almost 3 to 1 is a measure in the state of Maryland. It's question 6. It's an abortion initiative. It prevents the state from interfering with a woman's decision to have an abortion. It codifies Roe versus Wade, making abortion legal in the state, even if the Supreme Court overturns the decision, which seems unlikely at this point in time. Now, similar measures were passed in Washington in 1991 and in the state of Nevada in 1990. And one interesting note, Bryant, we didn't hear a whole lot about abortion during this campaign, but voters in our national poll support abortion rights 2 to 1.
No, if you'll recall, we heard an awful lot about it when the Republicans convened in Houston, and we talked about it at great length, but the thinking was then that it had never been and would not become an issue in a national election, and certainly it has been overcome considerably by the issue of the economy.
That's right.
All right. We're going to come on back in just a moment. We've still got a lot more to get to on our election coverage of Decision 92, and we'll do that after this.
Decision 92 Election Night is being sponsored in part by IBM. Today, all over the world, helping businesses meet new challenges. And by AT&T 800 service, because every call is a customer. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? It's more than a question. It's an answer.
You're about to see a side of Ranger you never expected. Now, all that famous Ford Ranger muscle comes in a body no one can resist. Introducing the 93 Ford Ranger.
Ford trucks, the best, never rest.
Granger is how tough looks today.
This month, American businesses could lose 1,800,000 calls. That could be enough lost customers to fill Dallas. Next month, Memphis and Tucson. Calls they wouldn't have to lose if they used the most reliable 800 service, AT&T, instead of another service. This year alone, that could mean 12 million more customers and millions of sales. So choose AT&T 800 service, and you can get everything that's coming to you.
No one has to tell you that doing business today is more challenging than ever. But all over the world, one company is helping you meet those challenges head on, no matter what it takes. New challenges, new thinking.
This is a Powers That Be election update.
Senator Bill Powers seems to be headed toward re-election tonight. This comes after one of the dirtiest campaigns in history, in which Powers called his opponent, the late Harry Truman, an empty suit. Stay tuned for Powers' acceptance speech in just a few minutes here on NBC.
We're back. It's now shortly after 9 o'clock in the east. Polls are still open in the west, of course, in the Mountain Time Zone as well. But Bill Clinton at this hour is within easy reach of the 270 electoral votes that he needs to be elected president of the United States. He's at 238, 270 are required. He could win it with the state of Texas, but even if he loses Texas, California's got 54, for example. He's very strong in Oregon, Washington, and a lot of other states that could put him over the top tonight. So we think that that will happen in the next 35 minutes or so. Here are the states that are simply too close to call for us. I did mention Texas. The idea that Arizona is too close to call boggles the mind. That has been solid Republican territory. It is the home base, of course, of Barry Goldwater, who was quite critical, incidentally, of George Bush, especially for his stand on abortion. Down south, Mississippi and Alabama are still in play. That was not expected. Ohio still in play. Virginia and North Carolina still in play. So there are some states that could come in for George Bush, but not enough to provide a firebreak to hold off at this hour, Tim Russert, what seems to be the inevitable Bill Clinton victory. And in Washington, I guess, for the last week or so, they've already been preparing for this eventuality.
Well, Tom, it's interesting. I just got off the phone talking to folks in Washington about the inevitability of this. 5 Republican bureaucrats were having a dinner talking about where they had placed their resumes, bemoaning the fact that they are now out of the government job. And one concluded the dinner by saying, and you know, the worst thing about it is the economy's so bad. Well, finally, on November 3rd, there's a wake-up call. The Democrat, I just talked to a Democratic senator, and I said, it looks like you may have 60 Democratic senators. He said, good God, no, now it's our deficit. Yeah, right. Reality time in Washington, Tom.
It also means that the steam room will be a lot more crowded in the health club at the United States Senate as well. Someone who is watching all of this with a keen amount of interest, who has become a major player in the national politics in this country, is with us now from Virginia Beach, Virginia. That is Pat Robertson. He got angry with me in Iowa when I called him a televangelist. In fairness, he is a televangelist, a businessman, and a power broker in the Republican Party. District and county by county in places like Iowa and Southern California, even in the state of Colorado, it's called the new religious right. And a lot of people are worried that they'll organize kind of out of sight of the conventional machinery of political parties in this country and then go out and win. Because
that's part of the coalition that would get George W. Bush elected president. And there were a lot of people who would normally vote Republican that got alienated by the Republican Party because of that.
They can count on a fixed number of votes coming from the churches and other places.
But what of the idea, John, that, hey, we gave you the ball, we got it to 11, you fumbled?
I think what you're going to hear in the next 2 or 3 weeks is a great deal of finger-pointing and backbiting in the Republican campaign. And I think its greatest theme is going to be, we are the professionals who helped Reagan. Bush and his people wouldn't listen to us, and they lost the election.
Katie Couric?
I was just going to say, you were talking about the religious right, Tom, and its influence on this campaign. And I read recently in the final days of the campaign, flyers were distributed to some 250,000 churches with comparing the agendas of all the candidates and certainly encouraging Christian congregations to vote for George Bush.
And a Republican Party operative told me at the beginning of this campaign all of that aside, he said, you know, the Republican Party has been able to win since 1968 as being the party that is strongest against communism, best able to take care of the economy, and strongest against for law and order. There is no communism. Economy is in the toilet. And law and order was wiped out as an issue after Los Angeles.
Let me jump in here, Tom, with yet another projection. Don't mean to sound like a broken record, but another Senate incumbent has prevailed in South Carolina. We can project Ernest Fritz Hollings, the winner, going back for a 5th term, defeating Thomas Hartnett. Interesting race in this one. Hollings, one of the authors of the Graham-Rudman-Hollings bill.
Second. Selves are our own favorite.
Fresh in any room.
So fresh, so
We're back now. It's 20 after 9 here in the East, and Bill Clinton seems to be marching inexorably to the magic number of 270 electoral votes. But George Bush is able to hang on to the Old Dominion state in Virginia, solid Republican territory. George Bush, the winner in Virginia tonight, 13 electoral votes. So on our map now, another blue state for George Bush, but it is almost totally surrounded. The outpost that George Bush has been able to get tonight, totally surrounded by Clinton states. In the electoral count, 238 for Bill Clinton, 46 for George Bush, and Ross Perot has yet to win one, although he might yet in Maine. We don't know. 15% of the popular vote has been counted, and Bill Clinton now is out in front of that. We'll be watching to see what the margins are tonight. We believe, although we cannot yet say, that this was probably or very close to a record turnout today. There seemed to be excitement all the way across the country, people turning out in very large numbers to vote. It's been some time, in fact, since we've been over 60% of the vote, going all the way back to 1964. Let's go to Lisa Myers now, who's at the Perot headquarters. And Lisa, let me tell you that we've got some numbers that Perot is doing over 20% in these states.
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
We're back now. It's 9:30 in the East, and sometime during the course of this half hour, it is very likely the man who liked to call himself the comeback kid that others called Elvis or the Panda Bear, that man, Bill Clinton of a town called Hope in Arkansas, will be projected the winner of the presidential candidacy of 1992. He is now very much within reach. We want to show you, first of all, the electoral vote. 238 for Bill Clinton, 46 for George Bush. He's just Texas away if he wins that state, and he may not, in fact, but there are other combinations that could serve him well. We want to show you now the states that are too close to call, and a combination of some of those states could serve him well. He still has a crack, for example, at a state like Louisiana, still has a shot at a place like Florida. And if he puts that together with North Carolina and especially Ohio and Wisconsin, then he's over the top. And we'll remind you again, as we have throughout the evening, that the polls will remain open in other parts of the country. You should continue to vote because there are many important offices and issues at stake. 15% of the vote has been counted thus far. Bill Clinton now with a 2-point lead. Ross Perot holding in there at 16% of the national vote. That would be a significant number for a third-party candidate. He's doing even better than that in a number of states. And in fact, we believe that Ross Perot probably has helped Bill Clinton in some states and George Bush in others. According to senior campaign officials who were talking to Jim Miklaszewski tonight, John Chancellor, the president now is at peace with himself and tranquil. They believe that the economy, they simply could not get over that hurdle, and they lost control of the Republican National Convention, especially after the convention. The spin control got out of hand. That is the interpretation of what happened there. Do you agree with that?
No, I agree that they lost control of the convention before it happened. I think that the convention, and certainly all the polling data indicates this, offended a lot of women, offended a lot of people in the country who thought it was too religious and too hard-edged. And for some mysterious reason, George Bush believes that you've got to get all the delegates on your side before you can go out and campaign. So I think the economy certainly is the dominant issue here. But what is really curious is that the president was going up, as Pat Robertson was saying just a few minutes ago, and then stopped. And it was very interesting because he had his message together. It was crisp and coherent. It was about taxes. It was doing well. And all of a sudden, I think he got so shrill, and he kept saying not why I'm any good. He began saying Clinton's no good, and repeating that over and over, and not saying I'm the better man in that. He kept saying you can't trust him. And he got very savage about that, and the polls just started to go like that.
Big question is, of course, what will happen with the whole issue of calling people bozos and crazy. And my dog Millie knows more about foreign policy than these two. When Al Gore, it was widely known in Washington, was one of the leading experts on arms control in the United States Senate. Brian Gumbel's got some news for us.
Well, we do, Tom. Again, and Democratic incumbent for the Senate, we can project a winner coming from Georgia. Weish Fowler turning back the challenge of former Peace Corps Director Paul Coverdell. Again, this one's significant because Fowler needed at least 50.
More room and a sleeker look.
Full credit for. Tom?
Thank you very much, Tim Russert. Well, at the Bush campaign headquarters in Houston, they're saying tonight that one of their big mistakes was to attack Ross Perot early. They believe that Ross Perot may have cost them the presidency. Very early on, when Ross Perot was just flirting with the idea of running for president, one of the president's aides said to me, listen, we do not want to have a conservative billionaire in this race. That's our constituency. And then he thought more carefully about it and said, well, our constituency goes beyond conservative billionaires, of course. We wanted to go now to Washington University in St. Louis, which was the site of the first presidential debate. They have good reason to be enthused and excited. It's a fine little university in St. Louis, and they got a lot of well-deserved attention. Bob Dotson is there. Bob?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Fine.
Well, I'll tell you, tonight is a big night here in this room. It's a little gathering of folks who came from all different political backgrounds, and they took a little...
Hall playing the saxophone. All of this seemed to appeal to young voters. Of course, George Bush said he didn't want to appear on MTV. He wasn't a mod MTV kind of guy, and he said it was for teeny boppers. But even George Bush and Ross Perot this weekend showed up on MTV, and I think that it probably helped Bill Clinton and Al Gore a great deal.
We talked a few moments ago about that one in Dallas who was in labor and stopped to cast her ballot and then went on to the hospital.
This just in?
She in fact, yes, in fact, they have had a baby boy, Lex Michael. The baby was born at the Margaret Perot Women and Children's Building at Presbyterian Hospital, but they voted for George Bush. We'll be back after this. We're back. Bill Clinton is very close in the electoral vote, but he's still not there. 238 electoral votes. John Chancellor, you've been doing a little calculation over there.
Well, there are 254 electoral votes that are still undecided, and Bush needs 224 of them to go to 270, the magic number. That's 90% of all electoral votes still out there the president would have to get in order to win, and that is the measure of his situation right now.
And if that would happen, that would be a historic night in an altogether different sense than what we've been talking about.
Isn't that the truth? Tom, we don't have any further projections on the Senate side just yet, although we suspect, it's 9:48 here in the East right now, we suspect that once we turn the clock past 10 o'clock, we will be able to project winners on the Senate side in Nevada and Iowa. Let's give you a look at how the Senate breaks down right now. We had told you earlier on that the margin was 57-43 Democrats when the night started. At this point, the Democrats hold an advantage of 20. It's 52-32 with 16 yet to be determined. 5 of those to be defended by Democrats, 11 by Republicans. Senator Warren Rudman of New Hampshire, outgoing Senator Warren Rudman of New Hampshire.
I think we're getting very close to the call, so I'm going to try and get to that in a few more states.
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
Good evening once again. As you can see from the map behind us, this is turning out to be a very big night for Bill Clinton from the tiny state of Arkansas, which was so often derided during the course of this campaign. At one point, the president said it's just a tiny state between Texas and Oklahoma. And it turns out that it's a state alongside Texas and Oklahoma, not between them. And those are folks tonight in the Arkansas capital of Little Rock, which was very big now on the American political map. Bill Clinton is just moments away from an electoral victory. And that's a small town where the governor, who has been in office for 5 terms, goes for a jog in the morning and knows the folks along the street. And as he said very effectively during the course of one of the debates, you know, when somebody gets laid off in Arkansas, I'm likely to know their name or to know the town where the factory has been shut down. Polls that are closing now at this hour, 10 o'clock, as we move across the West. Idaho, Iowa, Montana, Nevada, and Utah, even though we continue to make projections and the electoral vote continues to count up, and that you get the electoral vote in your state by adding up the senators and the representatives, we do want to remind you again But the polls are open, especially in the Pacific time zone and many of the mountain states, and you should exercise your right to vote. Bill Clinton now is the winner in another state that has been solidly Democratic in recent years, and that's the state of Iowa. Iowa has dropped in unemployment in recent years, but Bill Clinton gets the 7 electoral votes from the state of Iowa. George Bush now picks up a couple of states out west that he had counted on to be safe states. They turned out to be that indeed. 5 electoral votes from Utah, and also next door from the state of Idaho. 4 electoral votes there for George Bush. So we'll color in those states for you now. Let's go to, we've got Iowa in there. Let's put in Utah and Idaho. Blue for George Bush. Not as many as he would like. He's going to be surrounded before this night is over by a lot more red states than blue states, although we still have big ones to call in Texas, as you can see, and down south. So the electoral total now, 254 for Bill Clinton, 55 for George Bush. So far, none for Ross Perot. Here is the national count of the vote. We're approaching 30% now. 4-point lead for Bill Clinton. Ross Perot is holding strong in the 16-17 range. It may even percolate up a little higher than that.
You miss
and
Bill
if it
Clinton
does,
winning a lot of
got
states.
his money for it. He danced with his daughters
and
yesterday,
a lot of familiar
had a big rally
names in the
around the
Senate
country,
getting
spent his money, had a good
reelected.
time, and certainly became a fixture in American folklore, if not in the presidential race.
One of the things that we've learned earlier, were told earlier this year by many of the Republican operatives and some independent observers, was that because Clinton did not serve in uniform during the Vietnam War, that if that was used properly against him, that would turn all the Southern males, who were a very patriotic bunch, these experts said, against him. And so people began to pay a good bit of attention to that. I've been looking at the rough figures that we have in Georgia, which is a state where patriotism among young males is not unknown. Clinton and Bush were running about even as far as males are concerned. In Maryland, Clinton was slightly ahead. In Kentucky and Virginia, it was fairly close. And even in states that went for the president, South Carolina and Indiana, there was no big difference in the male vote. So my guess is that because Clinton didn't wear the uniform, it is not hurting him in the figures we have tonight.
John, along the same lines, one interesting note from the Gulf War. Remember when some senators voted against it, it was thought it would come back to haunt them? Well, the numbers tonight are showing that 9 incumbents who voted against the Gulf War all won, as did 1 congressman who voted against the Gulf War and won an open seat, Byron Dorgan, for the Senate. So that's 10 of 10.
When we were down at the convention in Houston, the Republican convention, we took a poll, Tom, you remember? 57% of the Republican delegates said that they would not apply the word victory to the end of the war in the Gulf. It's just sort of gone off the national radar screen.
Saddam Hussein is still alive. There's still many questions about our dealings with Saddam Hussein and with Iraq before the war began. And bigger picture, it seems to me, that as we change the political landscape of this country tonight, we'll change a lot of assumptions. World War II versus Vietnam, having served in uniform versus not having served in uniform.
Tom, let me jump in here, if I could, with a couple of more Senate projections, because we have 2 more to add to our list, both incumbents in Iowa. Charles Grassley, Republican, going back for a 3rd term, managed to turn back the challenge of Gene Lloyd Jones, who was another of those inspired by the Clarence Thomas hearings, challenged the incumbent in Iowa, but came up a loser, as did Demar Dahl, losing to Harry Reid in Nevada. Reid, freshman senator in '86, wins fairly easily. Dahl was nicknamed the Marlboro Man in that state, but evidently voters found his campaign wasn't smoking quite enough, and so Harry Reid goes back to Washington. Let us tell you about some other Senate races that bear watching as this evening moves along. In Pennsylvania, this one is very close, as you can see, splitting right down the middle between Lynn Yeakel and Arlen Specter. We expect this one to go on into the night before we can declare a winner.
To win one, Bill Clinton can win those electoral votes from these states where the polls are closed, but we've not yet called them. You can see that North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina is still out. Ohio, Wisconsin are still out. We'll share with you now some of the raw vote in some of those states as we take a look at, for example, in Ohio, which is one of the battleground industrial states. It's very, very close there. It's about 17,000 votes separating them now, with just 1 percentage point. Ross Perot continuing to run very strong. We don't know where his voting is coming from in Ohio. In Florida, again, Ross Perot running about 20% of the vote. Effectively a dead heat between the president and Bill Clinton, out of more than 1 billion votes cast. Look at that, a difference of only 16 votes. That's really quite extraordinary, with more than 1/3 of the vote counted so far. Right at 1/3 of the vote counted in Texas, and just 2 percentage points separating them there, and about 51,000 votes altogether. Ross Perot, 20% of the vote in Texas, probably took away a number of votes from President Bush in that state. The Bush people now beginning to believe that they made a mistake by attacking early Ross Perot, saying that he was a dictator, he didn't care about the Constitution, that he was a little bit wacky and paranoid and crazy. And that didn't go over well with the people who believed in the Ross Perot movement in this country. Tim Russert, you've been looking at what? The born-again Christians and their role in this campaign, and also veterans.
Tom, I got a call from some Bush people saying, you know, we spent all this time in the Houston Convention trying to relate to the born-again Christians, and they...
The man who said, in one of the memorable...
About 20% less for George Bush. That Bill Clinton and Ross Perot made serious inroads with born-again Christians, which underscores again how hurtful that Republican convention in Houston was. And with veterans, Tom, you and Jack Chancellor were talking earlier, looks like Bill Clinton has carried veterans with 44%.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to go now to Dallas, where we can see down there in the throng, he's not very tall, but he carries a lot of weight in presidential politics. Ross Perot, the man who said, in one of the memorable lines of this counted so far, Bill Clinton with a 4-point lead. Ross Perot is holding firm at 17. Most of the polls in Texas closed at 8, but some, I'm told now, are probably open until 9:30 Central Time. Some of the polls down there, almost all of them, have closed. That's probably true out in the western part of that state, because...
campaign, but that's because of his attention to the minor problems of his constituents. Despite an awful lot of allegations against him, his war chest seems to be prevailing at this hour, and he is turning back the challenge of the state's attorney general.
He wins the state of Wisconsin. He wins the state.
Enormous creativity and talent that you have displayed, and let's make our country work at the national, state, county, city, local, and neighborhood level, and at every single school across the country, right? Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to cut away from Ross Perot here for just a few moments. We have another state that we want to call for Bill Clinton that puts him just moments away now from winning 270 electoral votes. He wins the state of Wisconsin, which took a little longer than we anticipated tonight. It went Democratic in 76 and 88, so we color Wisconsin red now. Solidly in the Midwest, he's just 5 electoral votes away from winning. Bill Clinton, the 2 Dakotas could do that, form a combination of Montana, and then, of course, we still have California to come in with its big 54 electoral votes. So he's home free. 40% of the vote has been counted so far. Bill Clinton now with a 5-point lead.
As we broke for commercial, we told you that a Democratic Senate incumbent, Terry Sanford, had lost in North Carolina. Well, that has now been balanced because a Republican Senate incumbent has lost in Wisconsin. Bob Caston, winner of 2 Senate races by a close margin, has been defeated by Russ Feingold, a state senator who ran a very unorthodox campaign, one that actually deployed Elvis Presley on his side for a time. Let it be noted that Caston used the king, too, but evidently not enough of him. Feingold has up and beaten Bob Caston, leaving the Democrats right now with a margin of 54 to 34 in the Senate, with 12 yet to be determined. Senator Bob Dole is standing by with us. Earlier, we were able to project him as the winner of Kansas in a fairly easy fight over Gloria Adele. Senator, thank you for being with us.
Crack 100 before the night is out. Ross Perot still no electoral votes. Here are the states that are still too close to call. They're big states, and any one of them would put Bill Clinton over the top easily. There's the popular vote, first of all.
No one has to tell you.
World of constant change. There is one certainty, the financial strength of the Prudential, rock solid in securities, insurance, and real estate.
Okay, here we go, I think.
At 46 years of age, the man from Hope, Arkansas, the new president of the United States. Bill Clinton, the projected winner tonight in Ohio with its 21 electoral votes. That puts him comfortably over the top. California yet to come. He'll go well past the 270 required. Bill Clinton, who a year ago at this time was a little-known governor, 5 terms in that state. A lot of people believed a number of occasions that he was out of this race. He stayed in, and he has defeated George Bush. Moreover, he has broken a Republican hold on the White House that has gone on for 12 years now, going all the way back to 1968, only one 4-year term for Democrats. There they are, 46 years of age and 44, I think. Here's what's going on in Little Rock tonight, outside the governor's mansion in the state capitol. And that town has been in gridlock for the past couple of days. Clinton himself said that the merchants of Little Rock owe him a great debt because they've done more business in the last year and a half than they'll do in the next 20 years. Andrea Mitchell. He would be 75 years old now. One of the highlights of Bill Clinton's young life was when he met John Kennedy in the Rose Garden at Boys Nation. Some of the other names that have been cropping up, by the way, for a new Clinton cabinet: Marian Wright Edelman may go to Health and Human Services. Vernon Jordan would like to be the Attorney General, we're told. We'll also be hearing about Tom Kean, a Republican, for Education Secretary. Warren Christopher from California.
You know, Tom, Bill Clinton has not worked overly hard to correct the misimpression, if some had it, that he was trying to duplicate the aura that John F. Kennedy created in this country back in 1960. Certainly he has the groundwork for it. When you consider the turnout today and the number of young people getting involved in the process, the energy would seem to be on his side. And say what you will of Bill Clinton, you have to give him very high marks on 2 counts. Number 1, for resiliency. You noted the problems that he had to overcome. And number 2, for discipline, that in the face of whatever was hurled against him, he stood by his message of change and he stayed with it, and it served him well.
A year ago at this time, John Chancellor, he said to me, you know, a lot of people forget that I've run in 19 different campaigns. That's going to serve me well in the course of the next year. But he's promised change. He's promised jobs. That's not going to be such an easy promise to deliver on.
No, but what I think we are going to get is a different outlook. George Bush is 68 years old. This guy was born, this new president-elect of ours, was born in 1946. It means he was 14 years old when JFK was elected. He was 16 during the missile crisis. He was of draft age, as we know so well this year, during Vietnam. He was 23 years old when man walked on the moon. I think that we do have a new generation. Both of Gore and Clinton are younger people. They'll bring younger people in. You won't see that many old ones. And I do think that you will get out of that mix of younger people and a new look at the world, things we cannot imagine tonight.
And the thing, Katie, that we're looking at here is the possibility. We don't know yet. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but this team could be in office right up to the millennium, to the year 2000.
That's right, the first real baby boomer ticket, Tom. And I think it'll be really interesting to see just who Bill Clinton surrounds himself with, because sometimes that's even more telling than the person himself. Of course, Jimmy Carter was criticized for some of the people he surrounded himself with. Ronald Reagan was an excellent delegator. So I'm going to be very interested in seeing the names that pop up. And there's some 8,600 policy jobs and supporting jobs in Washington, so those resumes are going to be flying if they haven't been already.
It's not just the names involved, but it's somewhat the temperament too. If we look to the last 2 Democratic presidents, for example, and we wonder what kind of a man Bill Clinton will be in his dealings with the legislative branch, John Chancellor, will he be more like Jimmy Carter, whose relationship with Congress was at best acrimonious, or will he be more like LBJ, who it was said knew every congressman from eyeball to toe?
Yeah, but LBJ's failure as a president was that he was a parliamentarian and not a national leader. That's why you can't be one and the other. I think that this guy, Clinton, is going to be much more like Kennedy, who didn't have an easy time with the Congress, but was effective, and he had Lyndon Johnson helping him.
John, yesterday Bill Clinton told me that he's going to continue this whole business of town meetings and the use of the electronic technology that is available to him to get a sense of where the country is going and what is going on. And that, too, will reshape the presidency in a way that we have not seen it in recent years. And I think that there is a real feeling that the country has to be embraced. It can no longer be business as usual just within the Beltway. That's the circle of interstate highways, of course, and other roads that circle Washington.
But isn't that a result of this year's talkathons. I mean, on your program, you two were talking to these people. They were on Donahue. They were on a number of other things, MTV, as you said earlier. And I think that the idea of communicating directly with people is now something that's going to be with us for a while, and Clinton told you that yesterday.
Yeah, we want to hear from...
we're going to be seeing Bill Clinton on Oprah maybe next month?
There's a good possibility of that. We're going to be seeing Tim Russert here in a few moments, but first we're going to go down to John Cochran, who's in Houston, Texas tonight. He's at the Bush headquarters, obviously. Do we expect that we'll see the president before too long, John?
Abruptly, Tom.
Thank you very much, John Cochran. Well, it runs deep between Texans, after all, especially Texans with a lot of money.
Mr. President, he said, for now, George, call me Bill.
Right. Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, there's a little group that you'll be hearing a lot more about. It's going to expand, I would think, in the next couple of days. They're called FOB, Friends of Bill. Most of those people are people who reach back to his days at Oxford and Rhodes Scholars, but there are going to be a whole lot of folks around the country now saying, yes, I'm an FOB. I've been a member of the Circle for a long time, just didn't want to talk about it, but I'm an old friend of Bill's, and I'll be going to Washington if I can help you out with anything. I'd be happy
You have to pronounce that very carefully.
You do, exactly. You do, right. You see that I chose not to.
You know, you talk about, Katie, you talk about 8,600 people going to work in Washington at last, making it. That's going to have, talk about the effect on the price of Chardonnay, on lettuce, on their attitudes toward children, the number of them that have already been divorced, the whole social attitude that these younger people will bring to Washington. Not that they're all so old down there now, but an older president.
And so I think John Chancellor was right when he said this. The culture of Washington, D.C. changed with the Clintons in office. In some ways, it made things better, but other ways, it was kind of a mixed bag. And we will see much more of that mixed bag in the 2000s and 2010s, I think.
Tends to set an older tone, and I think the younger presidents, as we've seen in the past, Washington is not going to look the same.
Chardonnay is very 80s, though, John.
Is it?
Yeah,
well, you
that's
would
kind
know.
of out.
I don't, you know.
Probably more Perrier and really less alcohol for the yuppies.
Is Ovaltine still in?
Listen,
Never
it's
heard of
Arkansas,
it.
guys. It's Kickapoo Joy Juice is what they're going to be drinking down there in
Great
some places.
alcohol.
Right. No, well, as a matter of fact, there are lots of real estate agents who are a quiver tonight. There are hostesses all over Washington who are on the telephone working it very hard. It is a change in climate. It has to do with fashion and culture and music and entertainment as well as politics. We are about to enter a new era.
It will be really interesting to look at Hillary Clinton's role in the White House. Of course, some people say it's now going to be Billary, critics of Hillary Clinton, but it's going to be very interesting to see just how active she will be now that he is in office, because she doesn't have to make friends with some of the people who don't think she should be that aggressive.
We'll be hearing a lot less about her chocolate chip cookies and a lot more about her views on children and family and legal issues in the months to come, because...
Oh no, we're going to hear about her chocolate chip cookies when she runs for president. Believe me.
She has been an important partner to his, and however she may have cut in the judgment of a lot of people, he wouldn't be there today without her help along the way. And the fact of the matter is that she's been an enormously important assist to him. And sometimes people in Arkansas thought that she was a better campaigner and more decisive than he was in a lot of issues. Well, there's a lot more to talk about, not just tonight, but of course in the days to come as we anticipate now the Clinton campaign. You were about to say?
No. I was going to interrupt you, but I see we're closing down shop for another half hour, so it'll hold.
Okay. I know that it will between us, always.
Between us,
That's right.
no doubt about it.
Okay. We'll be back with more in Decision 92 right after this. We're back now, and we have a whole run of presidential projections for you. They all belong to Bill Clinton. He has passed the magic number of 270. The governor of Arkansas, who was once described as being 40 at 16 and then 16 at 40 in terms of his behavior during those ages, he is now elected president of the United States according to our projection. So let us show you what is going on now in California. 54 electoral votes. We anticipated that from the outset.
And California has voted Democrat ever since. The last time Republicans would make a serious challenge for California would be the following election in '96, but then they kind of wrote it off after that.
Bill Clinton, the winner in California. Washington, 11 electoral votes up in the Pacific Northwest. They counted that as the cornerstone of the new Democratic Party. Also in Oregon, 7 electoral votes. Bill Clinton, the winner there. Hawaii, safe Democratic territory, 4 electoral votes for Bill Clinton. We color those in now. Red across the western rim, the Pacific rim of the United States for Bill Clinton, and just a few blue spots on that map for George Bush. 362 electoral votes so far, 64 for George Bush. And now here is the popular vote as we have it so far. We're beginning to climb toward the halfway mark. Bill Clinton is our projected winner. He's got a 5-point spread there. And the vote that has been counted so far, Ross Perot is holding at 17, and President Bush at 39% of the vote. By the way, for those of you who are interested, it was the last time that we had more than a 60% turnout was 1968. And there's a good possibility that we may have exceeded that today. Brian Gimble, you've got a lot of calls here as well.
Okay, Tom, we've got some Senate projections that gets the Democratic total in the Senate now up to 58. Very quickly, in Hawaii, Daniel Inouye, a winner going back for a 6th term, defeating Rick Reed. In California, California becomes the first state to send 2 women onto the U.S. Senate. The short one for the long seat, Barbara Boxer, beats Bruce Horshenson. And the long one for the short seat, as they called it, Dianne Feinstein, defeating John Seymour, the incumbent in California. And in Washington, the mom in tennis shoes, Patty Murray, a winner over Rod Chandler. That is 4 new women now.
She's still
in the Senate, bringing the total to a half dozen, Tom.
Well, I tell you, that's important for Bill Clinton and the change in the climate. No wonder Bob Dole was talking so hard about Ross Perot voters. He's going to need all the help he can get. That's where it stands at this hour. In 1980, we had a sea change in American politics when Ronald Reagan swept in from the West and knocked out a lot of the old lines of the liberal establishment in the United States Senate. We've got a different kind of change in American politics going tonight. It is of equal seismic proportions, I believe, however. We have Bill Clinton, who is going to be the new president of the United States, and a much different face.
All right, I'm going to play a little bit of Clinton's victory speech, and then we're going to actually
the first decision that
go to
Bill Clinton
96.
made after getting the nomination, securing it, was to select this man as his vice president, and it was one of the best decisions that he could have made, it turns out. They were more than the sum of their parts. Tipper Gore and Hillary Clinton were a natural. Bill Clinton and Hillary met at Yale Law School. He persuaded her to come to Arkansas and join him there. They both taught at the University of Arkansas Law School, and then he began his political career running first unsuccessfully for Congress, then successfully for Attorney General, then elected governor at the age of 34, defeated, and then returning to be elected altogether 5 terms. Now in his home state, he stands before them, the President-elect of the United States, the 42nd.
My fellow Americans, on this day, with high hopes and brave hearts, in massive numbers, the American people have voted to make a new beginning. This election is a clarion call for our country to face the challenges of the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the next century. To restore growth to our country and opportunity to our people. To empower our own people so that they can take more responsibility for their own lives, to face problems too long ignored, from AIDS to the environment to the conversion of our economy from a defense to a domestic economic giant. and perhaps most important of all, to bring our people together as never before so that our diversity can be a source of strength in a world that is ever smaller, where everyone counts and everyone is a part of America's family. I want to begin this night by thanking my family, my wife, without whom I would not be here tonight, and who I believe will be one of the greatest first ladies in the history of this republic. And you can cheer for her. I also want to say a special word of thanks to our daughter for putting up with our absence, for supporting our effort, for being brave in the face of adversity, and for reminding us every day about what this election is really all about. I want to thank my mother, my brother, my stepfather. Who sought this office, was more aided by the friends of a lifetime, and I will never forget you. Congratulations, and an offer to work with me in keeping our democracy running in an effective and important transition. I want all of you to join with me tonight in expressing our gratitude to President Bush for his lifetime of public service, for the effort he made from the time he was a young soldier in World War II, to helping to bring about an end to the Cold War, to our victory in the Gulf War, to the grace with which he conceded the results of this election tonight in the finest American tradition. Let's give Mr. Bush and his family a hand. I heard tonight Mr. Perot's remarks and his offer to work with us. I say to you, of all the things that he said, I think perhaps the most important that we understand here in the heartland of Arkansas is the need to reform the political system, to reduce the influence of special interest and give more influence back to the kind of people that are in this crowd tonight, with the tens of thousands. And I will.
Bill Clinton, a new timbre in his voice now that he's president-elect of the United States. His dignity in his adopted home state of Texas. NBC News now projects that Texas, it is 32 electoral votes, will go into George Bush's
so Ian
column.
Richards was wrong.
He's in Houston tonight. He has said in the past that he
but
would
I think he
retire
barely
there.
won
also,
Texas.
in the state of South Dakota, which has been strong Republican territory the last 3 times, George Bush, the winner of the 3 electoral votes in the great state of South Dakota. So this now is how the electoral, this is how the map is shaping up as we color in blue. First Texas and then South Dakota. President
And so I think we'll end 1992 on this map here, because there are only a few more states to fill in. This is what it wound up looking like. And of course, the colors are reversed versus what NBC described. This is the last election where NBC did blue for Republicans and red for Democrats. And so it wound up being Clinton winning 370 electoral votes. And Bush did crack 100 electoral votes by a significant margin. He had a base. So he did win Florida that election in 1992. Bill Clinton would move on, and I think he won 2 additional states that were not called at this time. He did manage to win Montana and Nevada, which weren't called until I think the next day. This is the last presidential election. 1992 was the last presidential election where the Democratic candidate won Montana. And I want to say it was also the last one. Yeah, Montana's the only state, I think, that hasn't voted Democrat since 1992 among the red states. Or rather, like, it's voted Republican ever since, although I think it did come close in 1992. Bill Clinton did win Georgia. He would lose it in 1996, and then Georgia would then vote Democrat again in 2020. But it's been mostly Republican ever since then. So that's what the map looks like. I'm not going to dive too much into what this map is like, because for this particular stream, even though 1996 was a very similar election and a very similar map, the stream is gonna last maybe about 30 to 40 more minutes, because we will do 1996 as well. And so, but just some comments about this map. This is what Bill Clinton was really the last Democrat to win a lot of southern states, and a lot of states that after 2000 from George W. Bush have remained Republican ever since. And so let's go ahead and go to NBC's election coverage for 1996. We're only going to do maybe the first, and I'm going to skip around a bit, but we'll only do like the first 30, 40 minutes of it, because they actually called 1996 relatively early compared to 1992. And it's because there was a slightly different combination of states that Clinton won. So here we go. Let's see if I can pull YouTube back up.
From NBC News election headquarters in New York, Decision 96, Election Night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening, and if the current trends hold, this will be a triumphant night for the 50-year-old incumbent president of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton. We have now had 331 electoral votes at stake. The polls have closed in that number of states. We want to show you the states that are closing at this hour. 220 electoral votes are contained therein. This is a combination plate, if you will, on this election night. If you think of it as a menu, this is a very powerful group of states, all closing all the way down to the Southwest and Texas, as you can see, and Bill Clinton is winning more than the lion's share. He's the winner in Pennsylvania with 23 electoral votes. He's also the winner in the important state of Illinois, where he had his Democratic National Convention with the Daley brothers helping him a lot there. In Michigan as well, Bill Clinton the winner in that industrial heartland. In New Jersey, he picks up the 15 electoral votes there, according to our projections. Massachusetts, which remains secure for the Democrats. Missouri, one of those middle border states that was hotly contested in the early going. Bill Clinton the winner, his first stop after Chicago. Al Gore's home state of Tennessee in the Democratic column. Also the state of Maryland, right next door to Washington, D.C. Connecticut, the home state of Chris Dodd, the Democratic National Chairman, in the Democratic column. The state of Maine, Clinton won 4 years ago. He gets it again in the District of Columbia. Bill Clinton the winner there. Democrats can count on that. The state of Delaware, 3 electoral votes. That goes to Bill Clinton. Bob Dole is our projected winner now. He gets on the board for the first time in Oklahoma, which is right next to his home state of Kansas. He's also the winner in his home state of Kansas, and it's 6 electoral votes. So this is how the map is beginning to take shape now. Bill Clinton in blue, Ross Perot in gray, and Bob Dole in red.
And so, as I mentioned earlier, NBC finally joined the other networks and switched to red being Republican, blue being Democrat. And, well, we know what happened 4 years later and why that's stuck ever since. They were able to call a lot of states earlier this election than they did in 1992. So the call is going to happen a lot quicker based on the polls. And so that's why we're only going to watch like maybe 30 minutes of this particular election.
Bob Dole winning in the middle of the country, but the patterns are very, very strong.
And notice Florida went for George Bush back in 1992, but they went for Bill Clinton in 1996. That is one of the states that he flipped.
For Bill Clinton, he is well on his
And
way
they called
to
it
the
early, too.
270 electoral votes that he needs to win. Bob Dole is on the board now with 14. Tim Russert, it just couldn't be shaping up better for Bill Clinton at this hour. We still have a long way to go and important races out there, obviously.
But, Tom, the states you just declared for Bill Clinton, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, New Jersey, half hour ago, Ohio, they all have Republican governors. That was supposed to be an opportunity for the Republicans to hold that electoral base. They were states, so-called Rust Belt. No more. They're boom states, and the economy's good, and they opted for the Democrat.
All right, we want to take you through some Senate races as well, because that's the other hotly contested chamber tonight, along with the House of Representatives. This was probably the sexiest race in the country. It was the governor of the state of Massachusetts against John Kerry, Bill Weld against John Kerry, two millionaires, two men of patrician backgrounds, and John Kerry is the winner tonight. He'll be going back to the United States Senate with a lot of help from young voters and from women. This was a race of a different kind altogether. They both kind of sunk into the swamp of negative ads in New Jersey, and Bob Torricelli is the winner in New Jersey. That's the seat that Bill Bradley has retired from. Phil Gramm didn't do very well in the presidential race, but he is the projected winner in Texas. He'll be going back to the United States Senate. In Illinois, the Democrats hang on to the seat. Paul Simon retiring. Richard Durbin takes his seat from the state of Illinois. In Tennessee, Fred Thompson, keep your eye on that name. 4 years from now, he could very well be running for president of the United States. He had an incompleted term that he filled up Al Gore's term, and now he has a full term of his own. In Oklahoma, James Inhofe goes back for the Republicans, so the Republicans hang on to that seat. In Michigan, Carl Levin, as expected, has won handily. He's our projected winner in Michigan. In Delaware, Joe Biden is a powerful voice on the Judiciary Committee. He's our projected winner tonight as well. In Mississippi, Thad Cochran, a Republican, he hangs on to his seat. And in Kansas, this is for the full term now, Nancy Kassenbaum is retiring, and Pat Roberts will win the full term. Bob Dole still has to there. Projected winner, big race. Everybody was watching this one, obviously. A rematch. Harvey Gantt, the former mayor, the African-American from Charlotte, loses to Jesse Helms. In Georgia, Max Cleland hangs on to Sam Nunn's seat. This is a big victory for the Democrats tonight as well. Big victory in North Carolina as well for Jesse Helms, obviously. Now, this is how the Senate is beginning to take shape. The Democrats so far, according to our tally, could very well pick up one Senate seat. We have 41 elected Democrats and 41 Republicans. There were about 6 votes. Actually, there were 6 votes separating the two parties, the Republicans with a 6-vote margin going into tonight. The Republican National Chairman is Haley Barbour. He's at the Dole headquarters now in Washington. Understood. He's there with his headsets on. Mr. Chairman, these are always difficult evenings when we show back into the Republican tent.
Fairly or unfairly, Tom, the perception developed that the Republicans were excessive or, quote, mean-spirited. I believe the Democrats, and most commentators would agree, demagogue the issue of Medicare because it's going to go broke in 5 years. But the public had the perception that there was a trade-off between Medicare and tax cuts for the rich, and that the Republicans had, quote, gone too far. And we're seeing with the support for President Clinton in these swing voters across the Midwest, they are buying into the Democratic pitch.
All right. Tim Russert, we want to remind everybody that we still have a lot of important states that are still voting at this hour. We remind you to vote as well, especially in the Midwest, the Rocky Mountain West, and the Pacific states, where we've got those hotly contested congressional races and Senate races. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night, is being sponsored in part by GE. Visit us online at www.ge.com. GE, we bring good things to life. And by Prudential Securities. Knowing our investors helps us know what investments make sense for them. And by Ford Escort. It's new and it's nifty, made for the smart, the intelligent, thrifty. Decision 96, Election Night continues. From our election headquarters in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. We're back, and we can project now in the state of Alabama. It goes into the Dole column. It's 9 electoral votes. Bob Dole needs to see that kind of development on this big electoral map as it takes shape across the country now, because a lot of those states are beginning to be colored in blue for Bill Clinton. But Bob Dole down in the Deep South, he's our projected winner in the state of Alabama. We want to tell you as well that we've got, this is the electoral count now, 200, almost 200 for Bill Clinton, 23 for Bob Dole. You need 270 to win. How do you get that number? Well, it's the full House of Representatives and the United States Senate, half that number. It's a very complicated system. It works very well, trust me. For Governor...
Works very well, yeah. I'm looking forward to my stream for 2000. It's going to happen after Off-Kai, though.
Governor of Missouri, Democrats go back to the State House. Mel Carnahan is the Democratic incumbent. He's our projected winner in Missouri, and the Democratic incumbent in Delaware, Thomas Carper, the winner there as well. Delaware has been, in the last couple of election cycles, a very solidly Democratic state. Rahima Ellis is standing by now. She's in Boston at the headquarters of John Kerry. John Kerry had a very tough race against Governor Bill Weld, the governor of Massachusetts. He's our projected winner in the United States Senate tonight. Rahima?
Tom, I can tell you that a short while ago, a round of applause and cheers were heard in this room when the word went through the room that John Kerry will be going back to...
The national map begins to take shape now. Bill Clinton, 198 of the 270 electoral votes that he'll need to win. And Bob Dole is on the board now with 35. Most of Bob Dole's states that he has won so far tonight were the states that he needed. Jack Kemp with his wife Joanne and one of his sons watching now at his headquarters in California. He's made his final return there. He was...
And Tom, it's interesting, Jack Kemp was going to be the out.
We need to do something about
it. Is the economy is very...
Looks like he's got a lot of very close races around the country. Based on the projections we've been able to make so far, the Democrats have picked up at least one seat. If your polls are still open, please go vote. We are beginning to accumulate electoral votes, however, in the race for the presidency of the United States. Just one state now closing its polls at this hour. It's the home state of the incumbent president of the United States, the state of Arkansas. No surprise, Bill Clinton, our projected winner there. For him to lose Arkansas would be like Elvis losing his hair. He could go on, but it just wouldn't be the same somehow. Bill Clinton, we now color the state of Arkansas his home state. The color of blue. Bill Clinton is now past the 200 margin, on his way to 270, he hopes. Bob Dole with diminishing hopes now that he can reach 270 electoral votes. 6% of the precincts have been counted nationally. It's a very tight race in the popular vote thus far, but the vote that counts in this country is the state-by-state vote. We'll be watching to see whether Bill Clinton gets to 50% because he hopes that that will give him a bit of a mandate. And we'll also be watching Ross Perot to see if he gets into double digits tonight. Tim Russert, how important is it for Bob Dole to keep Bill Clinton under 50%?
Bill Clinton has told his advisors, I want a mandate. I not only be the first Democrat re-elected president since Franklin Roosevelt, but no Democrat has gotten more than 51% of the vote since Lyndon Johnson. I can then go to the Republicans if they hold Congress and say, the people have spoken. They want an end to these investigations, an end to the assaults on my ethics, and the country with me. That's what Bill Clinton's hope is tonight, Tom.
There is also a theory, however, that if the Republicans begin to engage once again in a lot of investigations, that it will not do well for them 4 years from now, because the country and all the exit polling that we're seeing so far is saying, hey, let's get on with the business of solving the real problems that we have out there.
We saw at the end of last Congress a dual track. Achieve consensus, have accomplishments to point to legislatively, and still keep investigations going as well.
All right.
And so a little bit of a backstory on that. The Republicans took control of Congress in 1994 in the so-called Republican Revolution. It was really a red wave, so to speak. And then they started really hammering Bill Clinton and started investigating him. But the timing was really, really bad right after that, because if you know, going into 1992, one of the reasons Bill Clinton won was that the economy was not that great. Well, 1993, 1994, 1995, the economy started getting better, especially, and then it started becoming, you know, with the internet being like with internet share and the big like very first tech boom, dot-com boom in the 1990s, that the economy really started to soar about the middle of the decade, about 95 and 96, and Bill Clinton kind of rode that wave back to re-election in 1996. And the Republicans kind of didn't, they were focused really on Bill Clinton. It really kind of, when you look back historically, they had a bit of Clinton derangement syndrome, a bit. Their entire campaign and focus back then was really over, trying to get Bill Clinton. And the one thing they did do, and were able to compromise with Clinton on, and Clinton was able to compromise with them on in the middle of the 1990s and the late 90s, was a lot of reform packages that Republicans had been pushing for a while. And Bill Clinton got that passed, and that's one of the reasons that the deficit actually went down, and Bill Clinton actually managed to balance the budget for his last few years in office.
Obviously, the contest tonight for the United States Senate, for the House, is still going on. In the Senate, the Republicans hang on to a seat in the state of Kansas. Bob Dole, you'll remember, retired from the Senate. This was the race, the so-called B race in Kansas, and Sam Brownback will take over the Dole.
These days and this year, Medicare and Social Security. 45% felt the Republicans would be more likely to reduce Medicare and Social Security benefits. And by the way, about two-thirds of the Democrats, two-thirds of the people we asked voted.
7 of them were members of the Republican Party. They had a special election, and the results were the Democrats controlled the 72nd Congress by 220 to 214. You can't hardly get information like that anymore. We'll be back with more of it right after this.
So let me jump to another recording I found of NBC's coverage. I want to see if this doesn't have a local coverage, because this looks like it's reporting from a local affiliate in Tennessee. Let's see, this is 27 minutes in. I think I'll be able to find one. Oh well. All right, let's go. We'll have to put up with this.
Decision 96, election night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
You're looking down on 30 Rockefeller Plaza. They're here in the heart of Midtown. This is NBC News, and coverage of Decision 96 is going on not just on NBC and at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, but on MSNBC as well as NBC in Asia and Europe tonight. We want to tell you that the United States Senate is shaping up as a very interesting race this evening. So far, the Democrats have been able to pick up
to be able to set the agenda themselves.
Lisa, the Republicans have just picked up a seat now. We're able to project in the state of Alabama, where Howell Heflin is retiring, that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, a Republican, will be going to Washington, D.C. as the new senator from Alabama. So Trent Lott will probably be breathing a little bit easier at this hour, because that was one of those races that everyone was watching.
Trent Lott was counting very heavily on the state of Alabama. The other race that he's watching very closely, the other highly endangered incumbent, is Senator Larry Pressler in South Dakota.
Or geographically, Bob Dole was a man born into a very poor family in the high plains of Kansas. His hometown is Russell. He tears up whenever he talks about it and whenever he returns there. And NBC's Jim Avila is in Russell, Kansas tonight with some of Bob Dole's friends who are watching all of this. Jim?
Thank you, Tom. Russell, Kansas, as you can tell from the noise behind me, has been tracking right along with the people and the race that's going on.
He was talking about Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon all being alive, former presidents of the United States. Right. He stood up at the Gridiron Dinner and he said, we have these 3 former presidents, speak no evil, hear no evil, and evil. Talking about Richard Nixon, he brought down the House. It was a Bob Dole original, and everyone loved him for it, and yet he could remain loyal to Richard Nixon.
And gave one of the most moving eulogies at President Nixon's funeral, and President Nixon often reminded him of that line.
That's right. Well, by the way, Bob Dole got in a little trouble with tobacco, during the course of this campaign. At Harvard, those students in the Harvard Yard this year, they said they had a big sign out that said, elect Dole Camp, free cigarettes. We'll be back with more right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. It's about 10 minutes to 9 now in the East, and this election night engine is about at full throttle because in just 10 minutes we'll have some very significant states of electoral poll closings in 102 electoral votes in the 9 p.m. poll closings in those states that are on the board right now. A lot of them are key states: New York, Arizona, Wisconsin, Wyoming. Places where Bob Dole has to win, or if Bill Clinton takes them away from him, the chances are very good tonight that he'll go over pretty swiftly that 270 magic mark. He's well over 200 at this point already. NBC
voters. I think in a second term, she's going to play for history, if there is one, not with health care, but try to find a way, perhaps education, perhaps children, a way of not being a co-president, but an activist first lady and advisor to the president.
And what do you think about the shape of the president's new cabinet? 4 years ago, he said, I want one that looks like America. It got him in a lot of jams because he kept trying to fill slots with different shades and different genders and different colors. What do you think will happen this time? Will he reach out to any Republicans?
I think it's mandatory that he reach out to Republicans and independents and try to heal the country, bring it together, and also neutralize some of these ethical investigations that are coming his way by trying to demonstrate he's being bipartisan and ask the same of Republicans.
All right. Well, Bill Clinton is in Little Rock anticipating what will happen tonight. When Harry Truman had his big upset in 1948, he slipped off with a couple of Secret Service agents and spent the night after a glass of buttermilk and a ham and cheese sandwich in a small hotel. Back after this. Tonight, it was a very dark evening in the living quarters of the White House for President Bill Clinton as the Republicans swept the House and the Senate and promised a revolution into the 21st century. Tonight, Bill Clinton proves his title, the Comeback Kid. He is our projected winner as President of the United States, re-elected for a second term, the first Democrat since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The 50-year-old man from Hope, Arkansas, who went off to Ivy League schools, eventually to England, avoided the draft, then came back and began the long climb toward the White House, running first for Congress, then for state offices. This is the headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas tonight. A night of triumph for Bill Clinton, for Hillary Clinton, and for the entire Clinton campaign. We're also looking at the DNC in Washington, D.C. That's the Democratic National Committee, which played an active role in this campaign by raising millions of dollars, some of them from questionable sources. It became a big issue at the end of the campaign. So we show you now the projection of Bill Clinton, our elected president of the United States, by winning in the state of New York, the 33 electoral votes there. Also in Wisconsin, in the heart of the Midwest, Minnesota. And Bill Clinton is the winner as well tonight in the state of New Mexico in the Southwest. And he's the winner in Rhode Island, just 4 electoral votes, but that's important to him. The projected winner in North Carolina, Bob Dole. And a moment to talk about Bob Dole, who also wins in Nebraska tonight and in the state of Wyoming. This proud warrior, severely wounded during World War II, a man who served his country so honorably and so well, not only in the Army, but in the Congress of the United States and in the Senate. His last valiant campaign comes to an end tonight. William Jefferson Clinton is our projected winner, 275 electoral votes. And Tim, if the pattern does continue, Bill Clinton will have a lot to lay claim to when he goes to deal with, if it stays a Republican Congress of the United States. There are a lot of states that are backing him up here tonight.
He will say the country overwhelmingly supported me. You laid everything out there in terms of my ethical shortcomings, and the people have spoken. Why don't you set it aside? They won't, of course, Tom, but President Clinton will make that case. Think back just 2 short years ago, Tom. There was, in effect, a vote of no confidence in Bill Clinton. For the first time, the Republicans won both houses of Congress, and tonight he's being reelected with an overwhelming, electoral college, at least, victory.
And you can see him moving very smartly in the last 2 years, from left of center to right of center. We're going to move smartly now to Little Rock, Arkansas, and NBC's Maria Shriver, who is down there in the midst of what must be a very happy crowd, Maria.
That is exactly true, Tom. This place just turned in an uproar when it went up on the screen about Bill Clinton and Al Gore. And I am standing here with one of Bill Clinton's closest friends and one of his closest unofficial advisors, Vernon Jordan. You were just watching the...
So many times when he came back, gravely wounded from World War II, they set up a cigar box in the main street of Russell, Kansas, and collected quarters and dimes and nickels to help pay for his recovery from those grave injuries, and he's gone back many times to pay tribute to them. Let's go now to NBC's David Bloom, who's at Dole headquarters, with a man who was at Bob Dole's side at the very end, another wounded veteran, this time of the Vietnam War, Senator John McCain. David?
Well, Tom, you're certainly right. One of Bob Dole's closest friends in the Senate. He traveled with us through this last 96 hours of the campaign. You've been up with Bob Dole. Tell me what the mood is right now.
His mood has been upbeat. His mood has been steady. It's been cheerful. He's been doing all the work while the rest of us strap hangers are watching a great performance. And whether he wins or loses tonight, it's a heroic way to go out, which is the way he began his career, and I'm very proud of him.
But Senator, you know, on the plane flight back, the exit poll results were coming in. Bob Dole, if nothing else, he's a realist. He knew at a certain point that this was not going to happen tonight. How does he cope with that?
The way he always has adversity, with a steady, optimistic outlook. Look, if this guy wasn't an optimist, he'd have never gotten off that bed in a VA hospital. And he never has betrayed pessimism throughout it, but he is also a realist. But he really goes out of this knowing that he did the very best that he can, and I believe that he did the very best that he could. There's going to be a lot of second guessing and, you know, the kinds of things that happen after an election is over, but I'm proud of the job he did. I still think the West can come in strong for him, and I'm very interested, by the way, that this is only about a 4% difference in the popular vote. ABC poll had a 16% difference, as you know. So this is popular-wise, it's
John McCain speaks for itself. But I wanted to say what he said about the popular vote is true. Bill Clinton would not get a majority of the popular vote. He'd win the plurality, but he won, I think, 48 or 49%, I think. So
it's very respectable, even so far.
But when you sit down with your close friend Bob Dole and try to explain how this happened, how this turned apparently into such a landslide, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I ain't giving up until the polls close in Guam. But if this trend continues, look, I'm going to say, Bob, you fought the good fight. There's a good economy. Best politician probably has ever held the White House is there. And you did the right thing, and God bless you, and thank you. Thank you for serving our country so well. And I think that's what most Republicans are going to say.
Senator John McCain of Arizona, thank you so much. Tom, back to you.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Thank you, David Bloom. Well, let's go now to NBC's Brian Williams, who's been the White House correspondent for much of the past 2 years. 2 years ago at this time when we were trying, not exactly this night, obviously, but it was election night in November, when George Stephanopoulos and James Carville and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were looking at those Republican election results. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 after this. We're now able to project that Bill Clinton is the winner in Louisiana. That only adds to his electoral vote total, which some time ago now, or in the course of this hour, exceeded 270 electoral votes. So we color the state of Louisiana tonight blue for Bill Clinton. That's an important state for him to hang on to. It does appear, if this pattern holds, that it will be a landslide electoral victory for Bill Clinton. At least we're still waiting to see what happens with the popular vote. That will be important to him. He wants to get to 50% or more so that he can deal with Republican Congress if, in fact, the Republicans retain control of the House and the Senate. Jonathan Alter is a contributor to NBC. He's a popular columnist for Newsweek magazine, of course. This is the first Democrat to win re-election to a four-year term since Franklin Roosevelt. But it seems to me that this time that Bill Clinton is out there doing it more on his own than he is as a man of the party. So it's going to be an interesting 4 years, Jonathan.
I think that's right. He's clearly on his own in the same way that Richard Nixon was in his big landslide.
One would legalize marijuana for medical use. A doctor could prescribe marijuana for glaucoma and for cancer victims. And Tim Russert, that's passing tonight. In fact, we're projecting, in fact, that will win.
This is where the current legalization move started.
Even more controversial issue out there is whether or not they should have affirmative action for public institutions, for public hiring and for the universities and so on. And the latest numbers that you have is that is passing by a factor of 2 to 1. That is that they would eliminate affirmative action in California at the public institutions.
And Bob Dole tried to make that, in his words, a wedge issue, Tom. And yet, even though that's passing nearly 2 to 1, Bill Clinton is winning California by a landslide. Right. So they didn't hold it against Bill Clinton. On the drug issue, drug czar McCaffrey,
Former Surgeon General Koop, 3 former presidents, all pleaded with California not to do that. Wrong signal to send to young people. And they think many people who supported that particular referendum, their long-term hope is to have legalization of drugs, period.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any question about that they see this as the first step. And the thing to remember about California and these propositions is that's where very often national trends begin. Tax reduction, that all began there. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 as you look at 30 Rockefeller Plaza on this election night, now Wednesday morning, here in the East.
This is an NBC News election update. Here is Bob Kerr.
Hello again. President Clinton thanked the American people and saluted Senator Dole in Little Rock tonight. Earlier, we heard a gracious and eloquent concession speech from Mr. Dole. All this against a backdrop of some big wins for the president in traditional Republican strongholds across the South, from Florida to Louisiana, Kentucky, and on to Arizona. The president scored surprising victories over Bob Dole. Mr. Clinton also won Ohio and the 2 biggest prizes, California and New York. In the battle for the House of Representatives, it now appears Republicans will retain control, but perhaps with a reduced margin. And it seems the Republicans will maintain their majority in the Senate. Now, the news tonight is not simply about the man who has won the White House. It's also about what he faces in a House and Senate that now appears will retain their Republican majorities. For some insight, let's turn to NBC's Gwen Eiffel.
On a Wednesday morning in the East, it is 10 o'clock in the evening in the Pacific time zone, and in Bill Clinton's hometown of Little Rock, Arkansas, it is forever, or it's 4 more years at least, in the White House. Bill Clinton elected President of the United States. As you look at the country now, as it kind of settles in at the presidential level, is this what we can call a quasi-permanent realignment of America?
Kinda, sorta. Remember what I was saying about 1992? A lot of solid blue states that we have right now, very liberal states, have been solidified since the Clinton presidency, including New York, California, Washington, and Oregon. Washington and Oregon would be close for 2000, and I think Oregon also for 2004, but they've since been solidly in the Democratic column. So with that being said, I mean, I'm curious to see what they have to say here, but we'll show the map in just about a minute.
What we can expect to see in the next few election cycles, where Republicans are going to do well and Democrats are going to do well, Tim?
Well, it's quite striking, Tom. There had been talk of a Republican Electoral College lock over the last couple elections. That doesn't seem to hold anymore. George Bush got 38% of the vote in 1992. Bob Dole looking around 40% in 96. And if you look at that map, the Northeast, the Midwest, and the Far West, more and more solid Democrat. The Republicans have basically the plain states, Texas, and the Southeast. Florida becomes the pivotal swing state in presidential elections.
Tim Russert, I swear, he God bless his soul, he always had a way of predicting the future. He very much the new sage of NBC in this era after John Chancellor went away. Anyway.
And Teeter and Hart, this is your field. Why is that? Why, for example, will Bill Clinton be doing so well in places like Arizona, New Mexico, as well as California and the Pacific Northwest?
Well, clearly Medicare had something to do with him carrying Florida and Arizona. And Tim's right is that
Pacific Northwest, you have a lot of young women who are taking their place in the social fabric and in the professional fabric of this country, and they are playing an ever more prominent role, not only in politics, but in business and in education and kind of setting the agenda, if you will.
Issues matter, Tom, and if you look at a coalition of women, minorities, and new immigrants, the Democrats have fashioned a pretty interesting agenda to keep them in their fold now and at least for the next couple cycles. Absolutely right.
We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
There are just a couple more calls and then I'll pull up the map.
Decision 96, election night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. At 1:40 in the morning in the East, there are some bittersweet moments for Bob Dole. This is one of them, I'm sure. In the state of Georgia, we are projecting that Bob Dole wins the state of Georgia and its 13 electoral votes. It's the home state, obviously, of Speaker Newt Gingrich. It's a southern state that Bill Clinton won 4 years ago, but not this time. Bob Dole is our projected winner, so the whole Southeast, save Florida, lines up for Bob Dole in the Republican camp. But then he misses a lot of other states as he begins to move north in New England and the industrial heartland. Bob Dole is now up to 148 electoral votes, as you can see, but still well behind Bill Clinton, who passed some time ago the threshold of 270. We're now approaching 80% of the precincts tabulated. Of those counted so far, Bill Clinton has 50% of the vote, and Bob Dole 8.
All right, now let's pull up the map for 1996. This is what wound up happening. A few states flipped to Clinton, but also a few states flipped to the Republicans since 1992. And so, as Tom Brokaw mentioned, Bob Dole got Georgia back for the Republicans, but Bill Clinton managed to win Florida, so those two kind of reversed. And then out west, in 1992, Bill Clinton won Colorado and Montana, but he lost those two and instead picked up Arizona, which voted Republican in 1992. Interestingly enough, if it had not been for the 1996 presidential election of Bill Clinton winning Arizona, until 2020, Arizona would have been voting Republican for every election since, I think, 1948. 1996 was the only time they had voted Democrat for president between, I think, 1948 and 2020. So that would have been the longest streak of voting for one party. Right now, the current longest streak is held by Minnesota, which has voted Democrat for every election since 1976. But you can see, as I mentioned, the realignment is happening at least among democratically held states. There are a lot of states that have just not voted Republican and have voted solidly Democratic ever since. Like almost all of New England. George Bush would win New Hampshire in 2000, but most of the Northeast outside of Pennsylvania was solidly in the Democratic column ever since. Same thing on the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington. And then Illinois as well. Illinois has voted Democrat every election since 1992. And that's kind of been the solid Democratic base ever since. And Clinton kind of was the last president to kind of solidify that and change the Democratic Party. Obama kind of added a few states to it, but he built on Bill Clinton's groundwork, I think. So, but anyway, that's our coverage for 1992 and a bit of 1996. I will do 2000, but it will be after Off-Kai, and that's going to be quite a long stream, I think. It's not going to last for days or weeks like the actual election did, but 2000 is kind of like the election that marks the beginning of the current era. So I will be at Off-Kai Expo next weekend, Thursday through Sunday. Looking forward to that. If you see me there, say hi. But other than that, that's pretty much gonna do it for now. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, we will see you later.